Good morning and welcome to another episode of The Big Issue, your favorite weekend current affairs and political analysis program. My name is Godfrey Akutubu-Fahati. Welcome to City 97.3 FM and also to City TV Ghana. And in the week, we've had considerable conversations about education and corruption. One born out of polls, one born out of just utter chaos from some regions where we have some secondary schools. And it has brought forth a conversation, a debate, some might say, over whether it is time to review the free senior high school policy. It is one that has brought forth educationists, policymakers, policy analysts, economists, parents, teachers. Everybody's having this conversation. Today on The Big Issue, we'll try and make sense of what the issues really are when it comes to the state of education generally in Ghana. Are you happy with it as a parent? I want to know, are you happy with it as a teacher? Are you happy with it as a student? I have policymakers in studio. I have politicians in studio. I have politicians and educationists as well. Prince Hamidama, that's who I'm talking about as well, will be with us. Dr. Clement Apak, same. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. And then we'll talk about the corruption that seems to have pervaded several state institutions in this country, as we discovered in the latest Ghana Statistical Service survey that put the Ghana Police Service, well, not put, they've been there for a very long time, the most corrupt institution in this country, listed a whole lot of others. And then we also look at another one from the Afrobarometer that says a lot of people in this country, and I'll give you the data, do not think that the country is going in the right direction. We'll try and figure out what is happening with Ghana in the year 2022. All this coming up with more on The Big Issue. Welcome back to The Big Issue, and as always, you know, it's an interactive program. If you want to join us, like I said, I want to hear your thoughts on the state of education, be it at the basic level, kindergarten, primary school, preparatory, junior high school, secondary school level. That is what we're talking about today. What your thoughts are, and of course, the free senior high school policy and what can be done to improve it, to make it more sustainable, to make it better, where educational outcomes are indeed effective. So you can join us 0549986996, 0549986996, 0550585832, 0550585832. Those of you who prefer Twitter at City973 is the Twitter handle. The hashtag is The Big Issue. You can also reach me on my own Twitter handle at Godfrey Akutubu-Fahati at East Sportsman. Same hashtag, The Big Issue. I'll gladly read your comments and suggestions on the program. Also streaming live on Facebook at City TV GH and City 97.3. On Facebook, you can leave your comments and do share the live stream. And if you don't miss out, don't worry. Just go to our YouTube channel, CityTube, CITITUBE. You can subscribe. Well, I insist you subscribe, if I may. And you can then catch a playback of the program. So with that out of the way, let's get straight to business and discuss education. A lot of parents have been bothered. Education has been on the agenda basically on a cyclical level. Every month there's a different thing. Either textbooks are not in, either teachers are on strike, either there's no food, people are not happy with the level of education. And this week, no different. On Thursday, for instance, we had the Eastern Region Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools cancel the upcoming super zonals because they could not find money to get food for some of the athletes. So we'll put together a report on that. So you will listen to about 3 or 4 reports. Once we are done with that, we'll come in studio and we'll have a conversation.
The Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools CHAS last week threatened to close down senior high schools in the Eastern region over the dire food shortage crisis in the region. Shortly after their recommendations were presented to the Eastern Regional Coordinating Council, emergency arrangements were made for 400 bags of rice to be supplied to senior high schools that are in dire need of foodstuffs in the region by the National Food Buffer Stock Company. This intervention was partly welcomed by schools, but according to them, the foodstuffs were woefully inadequate due to the enormity of the situation, and this has taken a toll. The upcoming Super Zonal Sports Festival, which has been cancelled by CHAS due to the current food shortage. Currently, students from 7 zones, namely Kibi, Somanya, Odan, Asaman Kesi, Akuyapem Kou and the Kukrentumi, who were training ahead of the Super Zonals competition to be selected to represent the Eastern region at the National Sports Festival on 20th October in Takoradi, have been left stranded and frustrated after the news broke about the cancellation of the annual sports event. According to City News sources, the decision to cancel the Super Zonals Sports Festival was arrived late last night after an emergency meeting between CHAS and the zonal chairs, who complained about how the shortage of food is affecting the athletes who are being camped. Some of the athletes in the Koforidua zone have been sharing their frustrations with City News.
Okay, so it is really sad because we've started our inter-schools from last 2 weeks and we've qualified this far that we have to go to the zones. But we've started training on Monday. We were doing our best, our possible best to go forward for the zones. And this evening after training, our coaches just informed us that it is going to be postponed. But it is really sad because the other zones have done theirs, the other regions have done theirs, but Eastern region, they've not done theirs because the authorities said there is no money to organize the other zones to come here.
I don't really know, like it really saddens me because I feel like I'm going up there, and to get to the international, this is the start, and just hearing this sad news, I'm really worried in my heart.
We are very, very worried because we all tried during the sports time, skipping class. Some even went down because of the sport, and we are all trying to get some qualification to the university to get scholarships, but we just fortunately we just said that it's being cancelled. So you see, you get a feeling, it's like you feel pity because many people have aims in the sports. Some even want to go abroad, but because it's being cancelled, their plans will, and then their aims will be lost.
Meanwhile, some external professional sports trainers who were contracted to help train the athletes called on the Ministry of Education, the Regional Coordinating Council and government to make the necessary arrangements for the event to be held, as this would discourage talent being nurtured in the country.
So we are pleading, that is why we are pleading with Eda Mami. I remember some years ago, we had a boy from St. Peter's, through inter-schools and Superzona, he was selected and he went all the way to all African games. So we are pleading, we still have those qualities here in the region. We have players like Latif Blessing, they all passed through here. Kotek, he was here. It was through here that he got there. Samuel Atta, who is now in Accra House of Folk, they were all here in the region. So this time, if you say students should come and play Justify, please, it is not going to help. Then universities, sports work, they also come here during competitions to select athletes and players. These players are given scholarship. So if we don't meet as a team to compete, it will be difficult for these children to also get the opportunity to get their scholarships.
We had to step in to find out what the issues were, and we are really working at it. It's work in progress, I must say. Ultimately, we cannot just wish it away, but we are working seriously to make sure that that problem is taken off. It's very unfortunate, but we have to do it, and we are doing it.
The schools will not be closed down?
No, we are not closing schools down. We are not closing schools. And let me take this opportunity to say that because of these important programs of development of our state, that's why government is asking her development partners to support her to meet this development agenda.
Mr. Speaker, the outstanding payment obligation of the Ministry of Education to the National Food Buffer Stock Company as at 18 July 2022 is 340,296,866 Ghana cedis and 8 pesos. Government is working towards payment of this outstanding obligation. However, government has released and paid this year an amount of 327,871,809 cedis and 10 pesos to the National Food Buffer Stock Company.
Minister, are you aware that the Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools are very, very unhappy about buffer stocks and its delivery of food to the schools? And if you are, what do you seek to do to improve it?
I had a conference called the Executives of CHAS yesterday. Upper West, all the regions around the country where there were serious crises the last few days, and they have all seen improvement in terms of supplies that are coming to them. And they will continue to see improvement from today on. So the food supplies are going to the schools. And yes, when our supply situation is not as we want it to be, Minister for Education is concerned, and we work with buffer stock to make sure their systems are streamlined and funding goes to them so that they can supply the food to the school. Thank you.
Those of you who were in Parliament yesterday would have noticed that the Minister for Education, the Honorable Yao Educhum, appeared before Parliament to respond to a number of urgent questions that I had filed. One of them had to do with how much government owed buffer stock and its suppliers. The minister, in responding to this question yesterday, made it very clear that government owed some 340 million Ghana cedis to buffer stock food suppliers. I went on to ask him when the amount owed was going to be paid so that the buffer stock would be able to assign suppliers to provide food to feed our wards across the country in various secondary schools. I asked this specific question in light of the revelations, as we have seen in intercepted documents from local chapters of the Council of Government Assisted Secondary Schools, indicating that various schools had run out of food supplies. The situation was so dire that they had threatened to close down the schools if nothing was done. And make no mistake, the revelation indicates that it is across the country. It is not only confined to the Upper East, Upper West, or Greater Accra, or Eastern or Western. Almost every region in this country where there are secondary schools, the schools are facing food shortages. And in many instances where they have some food, it is only confined to one or two staples. So you hear, for example, that students are being fed only rice 3 times a day, porridge twice a day, and sometimes gari and beans. I would have thought that given the budgetary allocation which had been approved to finance the free senior school policy for the year 2022, which is 2.3 billion Ghana cedis, the minister would have been able to tell us that they could defray the government's indebtedness to the buffer stock and its suppliers. Unfortunately, as we speak, government still owes buffer stock food suppliers. And the information we are getting, contrary to what the minister has said, is that at most, those schools that have had some food items or supplies, what has been given would not last the schools even 2 weeks. So the question that we continue to ask, that parents and Ghanaians should be asking is this: how come we have allocated and approved 2.3 billion to finance the free senior school policy for 2022, and yet government is unable to pay buffer stock food supplies? So we felt it was important for us to continue to advocate and to canvass and to call on government, to call on the president, to instruct the Minister for Finance to release the monies that we have approved for buffer stock food suppliers to be paid in full so that they can continue to supply food to keep our young men and women who are busy preparing for the Awasi well nourished, so they can have the serenity of mind, soul, and spirit to excel in the upcoming WASI.
And that was the Member of Parliament for Busa South and Deputy Ranking Member of the Education Committee, Dr. Clementa Park, wrapping up that report that basically puts everything into perspective for those of you who are listening to us at home. And like I said, I really want to hear from you, parents, teachers, students. We are discussing education today, and I'll not just limit myself to the free senior high school, which seems to be at the heart of this, but just education from the primary level up until the senior high school level, because whatever happens down affects what happens at the senior high school level anyway. So we'll put everything together. Let me just introduce my guest, Dr. Clement Apak. Like I said, you heard him not too long ago. He's here with us, Member of Parliament for Busa South and Deputy Ranking Member of the Education Committee. More importantly, he's a founder. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Kunala Kubasa. Well, I know the Busa people are watching. That is why I chose to greet you.
You should have given me some tips so I will impress people. You don't do that to me.
Anyway, I think it's a pleasure to be here and to say that it's been a while.
Yes, it has been.
Even when the issues come up and you invite us, we will respond.
You've been very busy, so
to do our best.
There's a lot happening in your sector.
For God and country.
Yes. Let me also introduce the Member of Parliament for Kusinintim and Vice Chairman of the Education Committee, Dr. Prince Hamidama, who's also an educationist, I must say. So he knows what he's talking about when it comes to education. Doc, good morning.
Good morning.
Today I'll not be calling you Honorable, today you are Doc, for the purposes of this conversation. We are in your area of specialty, so...
I think I prefer that.
Yes, let's deal with that one. Welcome to the big issue. Franklin Kujo is President of Imani Africa. Franklin, good morning.
Pleasure to hear your voice, my good friend, and good morning to my good friends in the studio and online as well.
Okay, and then Charles Ajitisowa is Chairman, National Council of PTA. He's also joining us via Zoom. Mr. Ajitisowa, good morning. Well, we'll get to Mr. Ajitisowa in a bit.
Good morning, and good morning to all those in the studio. And okay.
All right, thank you for joining us. And of course, Kofi Asare, Executive Secretary, Africa Education Watch. Kofi, good morning.
Hi, morning to co-panelists.
All right, then. So I guess I'll come to you, Kofi, so that we can put things into perspective. It's been a turbulent year, if I am to choose the right word for it, for education, hasn't it? And in your experience, have we had a period like this in our education where we've had one issue after the other? Basically every month there's a new one. Most of them recurring, of course.
It's never. I don't envy those in charge of our education and by extension our economy. I say so because what is happening in the education sector is a mirror reflection of what is actually happening in the economy. Don't forget that the education sector consumes about 20% of the public expenditure. So when you have liquidity constraints in the economy,
I think so.
The sector likely to be hardest hit in terms of its receipt of revenue for financing development would be the education sector, because it's the largest by far. So it may be unprecedented because it is a direct reflection of the economic shocks and the liquidity constraints, the constricted fiscal space that we continue to all witness and navigate through. And that is why it appears to be unprecedented. Of course, the burden is much huge now. And so the dimensions are broader, and then the impact is heavier, So yes, I agree that this is not, the best time for education. But I believe that it is not something that cannot be surmounted by government if the right decisions are taken and then the right approaches also are adopted. So we are in difficult times, but we will definitely get out of these difficult times.
Kofi, let me just be plain with you and ask you this. Do you think, from where you sit, that this government has the right strategy for education of this country?
I believe that the government has an education strategy plan, which is one of the best ESPs that we have reviewed out of our 8 countries that we work in, which is by far the best. Let me say the best. And so the problem is not about the presence of a well-defined strategy or plan. The challenge we are having are challenges related to approaches. You have clear objectives, you have clear strategies to lead you to those objectives, but the approaches, some of the approaches we are adopting are not consistent with our financial might, and that is the problem. So it is not about strategy, it's about the approaches we are adapting to achieve those strategies. If, for example, in the secondary education sector, in the basic education sector, for instance, we have set for ourselves very, very, very modest targets in the area of literacy and numeracy, in the area of access, equitable access, completion, and all that. And in our previous review, our last review, most recent review of the basic education sector, for instance, you realize that on equitable access, we are still struggling. We are struggling to improve our completion rate at the junior high school level. We are struggling to improve our transition rate between primary school and junior high school. Where we are doing well is in gender parity, and then also a gross enrollment at the KG level. So there are still equitable access issues. There are structural issues that we haven't fixed because we are losing about 20% of the students in basic education between primary 6 and junior high school, one alone, in deprived communities, just because about 25% of our primary schools still do not have junior high schools. So students graduate and then back to the community, they drop out. So structural issues that we should have addressed, not with plans, but with adequate funding, have been addressed with plans that have not been adequately funded. If you move to the secondary level, we are having a situation where we have a very modest and ambitious secondary education program. I think one of about 3 countries in West Africa having free secondary education. But if you look at our access rates, we are way higher than a country like, let's say, Sierra Leone. Okay, in terms of no access, but then transition from basic to secondary, we are high. We are doing about 65 or 70. No, we are doing about 80 in terms of transition from junior high school to secondary. So we are doing very well, performing higher than the African average in terms of net enrollment at the secondary level. But you see, again, the approach we are adapting is not consistent with our financial might, in that our free senior high school model is the most expensive in the world. No country in this world has free boarding education. It hasn't happened. Not even in Finland or in the US or in Kuwait or in Bahrain it doesn't happen anywhere. But we have it, you see, and we've made it entirely free. So it is good. It's had an impact on enrollment, but the challenge is that sustaining the financial cost comes with a heavy toll, as Otunfo, His Royal Majesty Asantehene indicated the last time when he was in the US. So there are financial challenges. Perhaps what you see is that there's an incongruity between some of the strategies and then resource availability. So that adage that cut your cloth according to your size is perhaps what is playing out, because even though the strategies are great, the approaches are not consistent with available resources. And in fixing that gap, okay, we have brought in politics. Now, politics intervene for a revenue gap. We have brought in politics and PR, which is not fixing the gap between the demand for resources and supply for resources. That is the challenge I find ourselves in. But in terms of strategy, we are very, very clear and good on strategy. Approach is the problem.
But isn't it also the case that we've never really had a unanimous approach, as you would say, a unanimous strategy? So we've had free senior high schools. The MPP have a way to approach it. The NDC has a way to approach it. I'm sure if another political party were to have a chance, they would also have a different strategy in place. We seem to have gone through different educational reforms that have never really, one would say, been universally accepted. And then you mentioned the big problem, the constant fight between the political and what the technocrats would push. So here we are in the middle of, as you said, a really good policy, but there is no way to move it forward. For instance, I can ask you this. Did you see a projection or a model form for what the Free Senior High School will look like year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5, from where you sit? Did you see anything like that?
So the issue is, again, it's not about having a consistent policy, because political parties always have various, strategies in mind, geared towards the same objective, So you have for example, the Education Strategic Plan has its own broader objectives and outcomes to be realized by 2030. If another political party comes, they will be expected to operate within, and it has always happened, they will operate within it, just that some of the strategies or approaches may change. So it is not too much of having a harmonized strategy, even though that is important. But we have a plan that we are operating within. So that is not too much of the issue. The issue is about adapting approaches that are economically efficient. According to the World Bank, Africa's population is a youthful one. We are the youthful population in the world. In 25 years' time, our population will double. And when our population doubles, it means that we are better positioned to be the next economic powerhouse by taking advantage of our youthful population and the market it creates and all that. But Africa will not be able to enjoy this doubling of a youthful population, whilst Europe and other countries age in their population, if we don't enhance literacy and numeracy and train our children at least through the secondary education level. About 60% of the continent's children are not in secondary schools. So the continental strategy is that expand access to secondary education. In doing so, all international organizations have recommended, including the African Development Bank, that countries must adapt cost-efficient means of expanding access to secondary education. We are not doing that. So the issue is not about harmonization of strategies with the previous regime. It's about adapting cost-efficient means. What we are doing is that we are expanding access to secondary education, but we are using cost-inefficient means. And it is very difficult to navigate your way through that process without a huge opportunity cost, including opportunity cost, not just on quality. And I'm not talking about results. I'm talking about the non-academic and academic ingredients of quality education, and the opportunity cost of having to overspend in the subsector of the education sector, and then underspend in another equally important sector. So I'll give for example, our issue of schools and trees. We've had 5,400 schools and trees. The Ministry of Education engaged a consultant to do the enumeration. They submitted it to government. There was a plan that in 5 years, government was going to eliminate all the 5,403 schools and trees through VACO Trust Fund. The program was launched. If you do a simple analysis, it means that every year we're going to clear about 700. If we're to clear all the, we're going to clear about 1,001. If we're going to clear all, there's a budget, 3.5 billion Ghana cedis. The last time I checked, only 2% of that money had been available, and we are now in year 2 of the plan. And VACO Trust Fund has been able to build only 14 out of 5,403 schools and trees, only 14. So it tells you that, you see, funding for infrastructure is skewed towards secondary education because of the huge number of, almost 1.3 million students responding to the free secondary education policy. So that is the challenge you're going to have, because you have adopted an approach where we are expanding secondary education, but not using a cost-efficient method. And that challenge will always be there unless we realize that we are adopting a very expensive approach to pursue a very laudable vision. And until we have a cost-efficient approach, we will stifle other subsectors of the education ecosystem of the needed resources. There will be imbalance in the production of raw materials to feed secondary education, and in that case, no matter the number of students we produce secondary level, the quality that comes there may be affected because you are not improving literacy levels at the basic level, you are not improving transition from primary to junior high school, and children in the northern region are still dropping out to the extent that 30% are dropping out between primary 6 and junior high school 1. So they can't even qualify and then get to the point of enjoying free senior high school. Let me end by saying that one other impact of this liquidity issue or this expensive model, which is making government very, which is creating severe financial challenges for government to fund, is the impact on the quality of school management. If you read Eastern Region Chart's release,
yes,
it indicates that since last year's second semester, no release for running schools have been received. Okay, it means that funds for running the schools are in arrears for 2 semesters. How, you see, we are gradually drifting to the point where we are with the capitation grant at the basic education level, where the grant is always in arrears for 1.5 years, and it's no excuse. It's no news, because we are used to headmasters borrowing money to run basic schools 16 years after bringing in capitation grants. That's why we have gotten to now with secondary education, because my colleague headmasters I spoke to in other schools that had exam before the former students, before the recent vacation a week or so ago, indicated that they had to run the examination on credits. And it's rightly so, because Eastern Region Chart says that the funds for running the school, including what the school would use to do even examination, sanitation, all the recurrent budget of the school, this year is in arrears of 6 months, and last year too is in arrears of another 1 semester. You can't run an education system like that, because you are stifling the management system, the management of education, of money. But on the flip side, it's not that government is wicked. The government is not giving them money. Government does not have the money, because our approach we are adapting is very expensive. We are spending an average of about $2.2 a day on each person in secondary school. That is the highest per capita secondary education in the world, a day. Over $2 just because of the feeding component. So it's a discussion we need to have. If you really want to achieve the vision His Excellency wants to see Ghana attain, by 2030, we need to adapt cost-efficient measures in expanding access to secondary education.
All right, thank you, Kofi. So let me come in then. So, Dr. Prince Hamid Amal, if I've heard Kofi Asare right, Executive Secretary of Africa Education Watch, great policy, killing everything else around it.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning to your cherished viewers. Let me say that if we were to appear before a panel, for a presentation, Kofi would have taken all the message that I have, given that he's virtually said the key important issues that I wanted to raise. I think it's important to set the context within which this discussion should take place, and particularly in reference to secondary education. Where have we come from? What was the basis for free secondary school? I think it is that discussion that will help us, to proffer, solutions to improve the system. The free secondary school was introduced because there was a general problem in terms of equity to secondary education, where empirical evidence and data that clearly suggested that a certain group of people were having access to secondary school in Ghana at the expense of others, and for which reason, if policy intervention is not taken, we are going to create different sets of Ghanaians, people who have had opportunity to go to secondary school and proceed to the university. Prior to free secondary school, and we must understand that secondary education, basic education, emanated from our 1987 reforms. The introduction of the basic education certificate examination, or the JSS, was that the minimum qualification that every Ghanaian child should have should be basic education, and for which reason the Constitution of Ghana recognized that and made it imperative for the state to provide basic education to every Ghanaian, and said that once they have finished that basic education, certify them. So you give them a certificate, and that certificate is basic education certificate. All right. Now, if you look at the data available prior to free secondary school, the demographic background of students having access to secondary school were people who had had the opportunity or privilege to go to high-performing private schools and have obtained the qualifying grades. The onset, the qualifying grades to go to secondary school was aggregate 36. Minimum of 6, grade 6 in 6 subjects. So you needed to get aggregate 36 to enter the secondary school. One of the reasons was that we did not have the physical infrastructure. And so we cannot allow everybody to go to secondary school. The data clearly suggested that those from the private schools were the ones getting access to secondary education. The assessment itself was designed in such a way that only 60% of students who write the BEC will have access to secondary school. It was by default, using the Steiner system. By default, in a normal curve, 60%, those who fall at the 60% of the normal curve will get access to secondary. By default, they will qualify. Okay. Now, over the years, we notice that the private schools and people from relatively advantageous background were getting access to secondary education because of, one, the policy imperative of BEC. Even those who have had access, there were issues relating to ability to pay. So free SHS was introduced under 2 conditions. One, to deal with the policy imperative of requiring to have a certain aggregate to go to secondary school. That was removed, and the government said, don't get 9 in English or math. The first year, don't get 9 in English or math. The second year, don't get 9 in math. So effectively, if we're talking about combined aggregates, we expanded the policy the entry requirement of minimum of aggregate 36 to 53. 9 in 9 subjects. 9 in 9 subjects will give you 6 in minimum of 9 in 6 subjects will give you 54. So if you take 1 out, that gives you 53. So that is the highest, most expansive, opportunity to go to secondary school across the world. I mean, if you take even the West Africa countries that take part in WAEC, Ghana is the only country that afford that type of access to go to secondary school. So that is what one remover, of the barriers. The second is the cost element. The people who have had access still have problems in terms of the finances to be able to enter secondary education. Now, if you look at the private and public school system that we have at the basic school level, 75% of our public school system, 75% of our basic school system are government. They are from public schools. And 25% roughly are private schools. Okay? So if we expand the access, you're actually giving more opportunities to those coming from public schools. Yeah. And there's a general understanding that people coming from public schools are relatively from a poor background. There's a general understanding. And so if you look at the distribution of the access to secondary school, you're looking at more of public schools getting access than that of the private schools, because assuming all of them transit to secondary school, you would have only 25% of them coming from private schools, assuming all of them. The other important issue that needs to be understood is that prior to free SHS, the biggest transition problem was from junior secondary to secondary school. Now, free SHS has addressed that problem, and now it is shifted between primary and JSS. But prior to free senior high school, the biggest of the transition impediment to the different levels of education was at junior secondary school to senior secondary school. all the previous reports by the Ghana Statistical Service, either the Ghana Living Standard Survey 6, 7, and the other ones, provide a very, interesting information. The data suggests that people from the lowest quintile, low or poor quintile, of the population, poor and poorest, because we have divided them into 5, poor and poorest. When they start from KG, only 4% end up in secondary school. Those in the upper quintile, when they start from KG, they are over 70% likely to finish senior secondary school and go to a senior secondary school. And enter junior secondary school, and also have opportunity to go to the university. Now, if we understand education to become education as a tool to bridge a poverty and a rich gap, then by affording, opportunity to low-income earners, you are actually providing the opportunity for them to also increase the life chances of the young people. All right. It is within this context that Free SHS, was created. The problems that we have seen are in relation to disbursement of funds. Purely in relation to disbursement of funds. This year, for example...
Not getting overawed by the sheer number.
No, not at all. I mean, if you have a budget of 137 billion for 2022, and you spend 2.3 billion on free secondary school, that's just 0.7% of the total budget. If you take the entire education budget of 17 billion, and you find a percentage of 2.3%, 2.3 billion, which is the free SHS allocation, it comes up to about 13% of the total budgetary allocation.
So in the minds of the purveyors of this policy, there was always going to be money to meet the numbers.
Obviously. I mean,
that was the thinking.
That has been the thinking, and that is actually because it is a policy to address an inequality in the system. It is a policy to address equity issues. We have moved into a global agenda of sustainable development. And under Goal 4, we talk about equitable access to secondary education. The reason why we have to move beyond basic education is the fact that evidence suggests that basic education, i.e. from primary to JSS, the knowledge acquired is no longer enough to function in today's society. Do you remember that previously people with JSS certificate were able to go to, were able to be recruited into the services, and people got employment with that. At that time, knowledge at junior secondary school, the knowledge acquisition, the skills acquired was sufficient.
Not enough.
In today's world, it is not sufficient. And that is why the free senior high school has become the benchmark, the minimum requirement for Ghanaian young people to be able to be sufficient in terms of their life chances.
But here we are.
Now, the issue is about funding. Government has presented a budget to support free senior high school. And we know that in the last couple of years, there's been issues with liquidity. The budget itself, there's a fiscal hole in the budget. We have revenue and expenditure issues. The 37 billion of the 137 is on servicing of debt. So the current economic situation has definitely had impact on free SHS. And we need to discuss it in that context. You cannot say that because we are owing district assemblies, we should scrap district assemblies. Common fund or get fund, there are some debt, our arrears not released, and so we have to review get fund. That's not how we review policies. The issue is not about the policy not achieving its intended objectives. What were the intended objectives of the policy? Is to provide expanded access to secondary education. Have you achieved that? What was the policy intervention, policy outcome of free senior high school to ensure that we improve the quality of education. Those of us in education setting, we understand what quality means.
Explain that to me.
The quality indicators are provision of instructional resources, provision of teachers, provision of accountability, ensuring that there's accountability for learning and the rest.
But those things are not happening.
No, just take your time. Let me take you through. The government, as part of the free SHS, committed to provide instructional resources. And who can say that there have not been any instructional resources? Textbooks, core textbooks are provided. They have reported it to us. He has copies of them.
Textbooks have been provided.
Core books, yes, he's here.
On time?
Books are provided.
On time?
Yes, on time. As it is now, we've provided supplementary reading materials, we've provided materials for technical education, we've provided core textbooks for teachers, provided school uniform. These are all part of the quality indicators. But the most important of these quality indicators, aside providing instructional resources, aside providing facilities, aside recruiting teachers and paying them, aside providing desks and everything, the ultimate is that the young person who is taught, passes out of the examination system well.
I'm not buying this. Doctor, I'm not buying
Let me.
I'm not buying what you're selling.
I'm saying that
your quality barriers are very low.
I'm saying that in education analysis, quality indicators are already established. There are many of them.
You are justifying just throwing huge numbers in schools and asking them to graduate. That is what you are justifying. This is your quality definition I won't buy.
Can I finish? I am saying that quality indicators for education assessment, remember, quality is a construct.
Yes, it is.
So construct, they are not like the natural science that you know that when you throw something up, it will come down. Social constructs are defined by specific indicators and variables. I'm saying that in education measurement, there are specific quality indicators that include, and I've mentioned to you, that instructional resources are part of quality indicators. Go to the extent literature in education assessment and you will find them. And I'm saying that government has committed and provided core textbooks, supplementary materials, other instructional resources that ensures that the teachers and the student can learn. Beyond that, I'm saying that you need quality teachers. You need to pay teachers. You need to get adequate teachers. You need to ensure that there's accountability for learning, time on task, that the period that has been assigned for learning, teachers are teaching in accordance with those periods, and the curriculum expectations are met. When you aggregate all that, the product that you find, they must pass in the assessment, because after you have undergone training, you must be assessed. So the assessment component in our secondary school system is the West Africa certificate examination. We do not have any form of external, what we call summative assessment, except WASSCE. From 2017 up to now, the WASSCE results have been improving. In fact, in the free SHS graduates, they got all the award that WAEC gave in 2020. Ghanaian students got the best award in WASSCE across the other, across the countries that are taking part in WAEC.
From which schools?
Well, I can give you the names of the schools right now.
I hope you don't mention Prempeh, Achimota.
No, I can give you.
Wesley Girls, Holy Child.
I can give you that, but I can even give you a school from some Gomoa, a young guy who got the best student from a school that is relatively unknown, and it is already online.
Okay.
2021 again, we had the best, second highest. The point is that even after when we started free SHS, the exams results for English, mathematics, and science have been the best since we started secondary education. The data is there. It's published online. So beyond the fact that the government has provided resources and very committed to ensure that the program sustained, the outcome that we are looking for has not been bad. And that's what it's important that we get our listeners and viewers to get. There may be pockets of concern, and I agree. Look, I have spent a lot, yes, there may be pockets of concerns. I have spent a lot of time on studying the rhetoric of policy and the reality. When we say the expectation of the policy and what actually happens. Across the world, there is always what we call the rhetoric, the reality gap. There's a gap between the expectation of the policy and what happens. There's always been a gap. What is important is for the policy maker to design an inherent program to ensure that this gap is bridged. In the science literature, we refer them as fidelity of implementation. They have been consistent review, operational review of the free SHS and the free SHS secretariats to ensure that we provide the quality service that we want to provide to our young people. The challenge we have is not only restricted to free SHS. Anytime there are issues raised on free SHS, people jump into that the policy is not working and that we have to review and it has to change because there are liquidity or financial issues.
That, because it's affecting others. We've spoken about JHS and what is happening
yes,
because of FCDI.
Yeah, of course, we will come to that. If you want us to debate, I told your producer that I want you to give me the whole 1 hour and a half. I cannot even finish. You understand? So please, let's take our time to let the viewers and the listeners to appreciate the issues here. When you saw education is a system, and the system is made up of different components, and you have all of them must work together for the system to work. My brother Kofi talks about, for example, schools and the trees. Yeah. We can never eliminate schools and the trees because no government starts schools and the trees. GES never established a school called Schools and the Trees. Communities will continue to aggregate some young people together, get some people to teach them, and then inform government that we have started some school and that we need help. That is how Schools and the Trees begins. GES never starts schools and the trees. So even if
infrastructure might deteriorate and you move the children from the classroom to a tree.
Yes, that's fine.
That's also that.
But in most cases, the issues around schools and the trees, for example, has come from that area. So I'm saying that the free senior high school program is one of the best social policy any government has ever
in its current form.
In its current form. The appeal will go to Ministry of Finance
to find money
to ensure that monies are released on time. The Minister of Education and the Ghana Education Service have appeared before the Parliamentary Select Committee on Education, and they have consistently raised concern about the late disbursement of funds. That is the cardinal issue. It is not about the fact that the government is not committed or government doesn't have the money. It is about the fact that the monies are not released on time. But if the monies are not released on time, what may be the underlying cause? The underlying cause is that we are currently under a certain situation that has made it difficult for us to fulfill some of our obligations. But I appeal to the Ministry of Finance and government that within the context of this constricted budget and the physical situation we find ourselves, because this is a priority program, we must do our best to ensure that resources are allocated on time so that the free senior high school policy will continue to deliver access to our young people.
Hold on for me. Let me just ask you a simple question. With the system that you've just described, that is producing quality, as you said, 2017, you wrote a paper, did you not?
Yes.
On how to fix education in Ghana.
Yes.
All these things that you said.
Yes.
Are they reflected in the paper that you wrote? And the ideas that you enunciated as to how to fix Ghana's educational problems?
2017, the paper that I wrote, very expansive. I'm sure you have taken your time to look at it.
Oh, I've read it several times.
I talked about assessment issues. I talked about curriculum issues. I talked about developing a teacher standards. I talked about
low scores at BEC.
Pardon?
You spoke about low scores of BEC.
Exactly, and
you want BEC removed?
Yes, and so let me explain to you. So I said that in order to allow expanded access to secondary education, we must scrap BECE because basic education certificate examination has become an impediment to access to education. Government has done that by making BECE a placement examination and not a certification exams. Okay, I talked about the fact that we need a curriculum that ensures that standards are set, that when a child is in primary 1 or a child is in primary 2, a parent can be able to identify specific standards that a child should be able to demonstrate. That recommendation resulted in the curriculum review where a standard-based curriculum was developed. I talked about teacher standards. I said that we need to ensure that teacher quality is improved. That recommendation resulted in what we have in the reform of teacher education, where teacher education curriculum was changed to from 3 years to 4 years, and now they are prepared within a certain curriculum framework and to be able to teach our young people. It is also as a result of some of this recommendation that we now have a national teacher standards, and now we have a licensure exams going on. So it would appear that the suggestions, somehow somebody read, you have read, I don't know that you have read, but people have read. Really? I didn't know that you have read. I mean, these are academic papers we write. I think I did this paper for Institute for Economic Affairs. They had a program that I was invited, and I did this paper. So the point is that the key issues that is affecting our education system. Okay, go ahead.
In addition, we might have to offer a comprehensive secondary education system in which general secondary education and technical and vocational education and training are delivered in the same school, with a view to stimulating a parity of esteem between GSE and TVET. Examples may be found in Sweden, England, and Scotland. After primary 6, the student can progress to 6-year secondary education or high school from SS1 to 6. By this arrangement, BECE, which has become a major impediment to access to secondary education, could either be scrapped or used as a placement tool rather than for certification. Then you go on to talk about this being accepted by the government as captured in the 2017 budget statement. Expanding access to secondary education is not exclusively a matter of building new schools or rehabilitating and expanding existing ones. Neither is it only about providing free secondary education.
Yes. So I said that. Yes. Yes, because if you say you are providing
Let me take a quick break. I'll be right back.
If you say you are providing free secondary education,
Hi, have you missed any business news this week?
Our appeal to the banks that it is not enough to show fat profits at the end of the year, publish them in the newspapers, and feel good.
Are you looking for a way to consume business news without getting lost in all of the technical language? Well, for our traders down here, all they care about is the fact that this would likely affect the cost of doing business.
We used to pay an average of $3,000 somewhere in November. Now it has shoot as much as $12,000 for a 40-footer container.
Business Weekly brings you all the top business stories of the week in an exciting manner.
Business Weekly, Sundays at 3 p.m. only on City TV.
Well, so, are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome back to the big issue on City TV and City 97.3 on radio. Having a very nice discussion on education with a lot of educationists and politicians. Today they are mixed. Dr. Clement Park is an educationist. He's also a politician, member of parliament for Busa South. You'll hear him. Dr. Prince Hamid Ama, of course, as well, an educationist, member of parliament for Kwesi Minti, vice chair of the education committee, Kofi Asare, is also with us, executive secretary, Africa Education Watch. You'll hear from Charles Adjei-Tesua in a bit, and then Franklin Kujo, president of Imani Africa. I've spent the last 30 minutes going back and forth with Dr. Prince Hamid Ama, and I'll come back to him. Hold on your fire for me. Let me talk to a parent, the person who chairs the National Council of PTA. Charles Adjei-Tesua, good morning. Okay, we'll try and get Mr. Adjei-Tesua back. Let me come to Dr. Park. So, Dr. Park, I'm sure you've heard Kofi Asare, you've heard Dr. Prince Hamid Ama, who puts up a sound defense of the context of setting up Free Senior High School and what it has been able to achieve, irrespective of the current difficulties that it finds itself in. And he says that they have not overprojected, they've not overcounted. If the money were available, and it should be, liquidity were better, they would be able to, there would not be complaints about this. And goes on to explain that quality, which is the most important outcome everybody is looking for in this particular engagement, is being achieved. Your thoughts? You've been busy with the Minister in Parliament.
First of all, let me say good morning to you and to viewers and Dr. Ama. You know, he's a deputy chair, and I am the deputy ranking member. So in terms of parliamentary protocols, we are at par. But he happens to be on the side of the governing MPP.
You cannot chair when the
that is why I'm saying, because of the fact that you belong to the party in power, he gets to chair. But when you are not there, I get to chair as well. Yeah, no, he's put up a very spirited effort to try and justify and explain why we are where we are. And I think that it is admirable. But whether I agree with him or not is another issue. You see, there are many issues affecting effective teaching and learning in this country. And I'm glad that Kofi mentioned matters to do with the basic sector, though I know most of the conversation, as picked up by Prince Ama, have centered on the Free Senior School policy. But we cannot ignore, because I've always argued that you cannot build a superstructure on a weak and in some cases a non-existing foundation. And that is why, for example, you know, Africa Education Watch and other similar organizations have been canvassing for more attention and indeed equal or if not more resources to be invested in the basic sector, because that is the foundation. They must come from somewhere to enter secondary schools and benefit from the Free Senior School policy. So we talk about the fact that the new curriculum has been in place at the basic level for close to 3 years now, and it is now that books are going out
for public schools.
And they have not even gotten to the public schools yet. It's not that the books are not there, but in terms of their availability
public schools.
In the public schools, we are yet to achieve that. See, there's another interesting point that perhaps many people have not averted their minds to. In the implementation of the new standard-based curriculum, the expectation was that it would have covered from KG to JHS 3. But as we speak now, whilst KG to primary 6 has been under the new curriculum for the past 3 years, when they transition to junior high school, they revert back to the old curriculum. And I think that is a matter that should be of concern, because we all know the basis for which government justified the introduction of the new curriculum. And to some of us, it simply is inconsistent and doesn't make a great deal of sense that KG to primary 6, they use the new curriculum, although the books are still not available. He spoke about instructional packages and all of that. And then they get to junior high school and they have to go back to the old curriculum. Kofi Asare spoke about the capitation grant. Very worrisome. In fact, I had the chance to ask the minister a question about that. And he admitted that indeed government owed the payment of capitation grants. And to me, that is untenable because we know the importance of this grant. This is the grant that allows the heads of basic schools to have some resources immediately available where they can apply that to resolve some challenges that they may face, whether it is fixing a broken down window, a door, buying some chalk, some markers, and what have you. So when you have the arrears, different tranches not being paid going back to 2019, where the heads of these basic schools have to find their own private resources to, take care of, these challenges that may befall them. At some point, they are no longer capable of doing that. And that clearly affects teaching and learning at the basic level. And yet, year in, year out, as Kofi said, we make budgetary allocations and approve for capitation grants. I mean, in 2021, we allocated 60 million. In 2022, we allocated slightly beyond, above 60 million. And yet, we still owe. And so how do you run a system like that when you are not giving the managers of the system, those who are in the middle of the theater, the requisite resources to be able to, enhance progress?
Just a matter of clarity. Has this not been the regular situation with the
But why should that be?
I'm just asking.
Yeah, but that, you see, that is why we would come to the issue of finances and their disbursements. Because that is another example. And it is the same reason that, for me, has accounted for some of the challenges that some of us have identified within the context of the implementation of the Free Senior School policy. So I just wanted to put that out there. And, Dr. Amma spoke about reforms, the introduction of the new standard-based curriculum, and the fact that we ought to have a system of assessing the capacity of our wards at various intervals. And I think that is welcome. But I thought that it was a good thing. Because, if you look at the statistics, if you look at some global reports, you will know that when it comes to literacy and numeracy, we are challenged in terms of the percentage of, the pupils in primary school who are up to the global standard in terms of literacy and numeracy. And I believe one of the reasons why the reforms were introduced was to sort of try to address this matter. Reckon that last year in December, the first national standard test was organized for pupils in primary 4. The intention, as far as I know, was for us to use this as a basis to assess. But originally, if you look at the program of action, it wasn't supposed to be only primary 4. It was to be 2, 4, 6, and I believe DHS 2 that we're supposed to do it simultaneously. But because it was the first time, I believe the managers of our educational system decided that perhaps let's start with primary 4 and then we take it from there. Unfortunately, as we sit, we are yet to see the outcome of that test. So while the test has been conducted, resources were applied to it, as we sit now, the results have not come, and therefore the purpose or intent for organizing the test and investing resources into it have not been achieved. So clearly, we have issues when it comes to the basic sector. The issues of, furniture deficits is almost across the country. I think just even yesterday, the day before yesterday, there was a question around that. And even the speaker who was in the seat at the time was the second deputy speaker. And he actually called the minister's attention to pay particular interest to this issue of furniture deficit. And you know that many of our basic schools across this country don't have libraries, let alone to talk about computer labs and what do you call it? Science labs. So we have a myriad of challenges when it comes to the basic level. Now, let's look at secondary. where I think a lot of the issues that have precipitated the presence of Prince Sama and my good self, and the likes of Franklin Kujo, and leadership within the context of the Parents Association. And as for Kofi Asare, he is, I would say, a regular attendee to, the supper of educational issues in Ghana, doing fantastic work, I must admit. One of the challenges we have, as far as the Free Senior High School is concerned, to me, is the lack of a policy document.
There still isn't one?
A lack of a policy document.
I know there is policy document.
But I have not seen it. I have not seen it.
I have seen a policy document.
I would like it. In fact, I would follow you.
In fact, there is a policy document, Free SHS policy guideline implementation,
Very
which
well.
is the policy document, which spells out how
the
whole process is.
I would like a copy. I would like a copy so badly. If it has to take me following you to go and get a copy, I will do that.
Please add me to that.
And so you can imagine, if I am a member of the education committee and I'm a deputy ranking member and I'm not even aware that there is a policy and I don't have a copy,
I knew it way back.
Then it means that there are many more Ghanaians in the educational space who have no access to that policy. Well, today we are told that there is a policy, and I'm hoping that we will get it. Now let's come to the issues. The argument has been made very forcefully that the Free Senior High School and its implementation has brought some positive benefits as far as secondary education is concerned. Broadly speaking, I think that that is an argument that we can tolerate. But we ought to dig deeper and look at the variables that define the concept of free as captured on the website of the Free Senior High School Secretariat.
Okay.
And then do the assessment on the basis of those identified variables. Then we can have a proper understanding of whether or not the program is meeting its targets and whether or not it has challenges that will require a national forum to review the program. When we look at enrollments, I have a document from the Ministry of Education that was presented to us in preparation for the 2022 budget.
Yes.
And the title is Ministry of Education Overview of 2022 Budget to Parliamentary Select Committee on Education, dated December 2021. If you were to look at the document on page, let's see, page 7, data is provided regarding enrollments. And quite honestly, if you look at the data in the form of a bar graph, and I'll give it to you, the implementation of the Free Senior High School policy has not led to an astronomical increase in enrollment. It doesn't stand out. It doesn't
that's
stand
your
out.
reading
No,
of the
no,
data.
this is the document. I'll give it to you.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not. I didn't produce this.
Numbers. Yes.
And I can tell you, the data provided by the ministry to us goes all the way back to 2015. So, Senior High School Enrollment Trends, that's the title. 2015, it was 804,974. 804,974. 2016, it rose to 851,312. 2017, this was when the first cohort of the Free Senior High School beneficiaries entered first year. It went to 880,770. 2018, we now have the second cohort joining. And we now have the last group that was from the years before the introduction of Free Senior High School. It went up to 958,819. Then 2019, by this time, we only had the beneficiaries of the current senior high school, the three cohorts, year 1 to year 3, enrolling. The numbers rose to 1,096,258. 2020, they went up to 1,200,580. 2021, 1,261,495. So clearly, if you look at this trend,
you don't consider these.
I'm making a point.
Over 400,000.
If you look at this trend,
okay, go on.
It does not show
I'll
a
ask
spike.
Sorry about it.
Nothing just really jumps out. Where you probably would have had the bar doubling what was happening before. So I'm saying that we should be very modest in pushing that argument that because of the implementation of the free senior high school, there has been an astronomical increase in enrollment. Because their own data, and I am not the one who produced this document, does not suggest that. This is not to say that we have not seen an increase in enrollments. In fact, some would even argue that if you look at this trend and you do this analysis based on national population growth, it cannot be as a result of free senior high school. It is likely a product of national population growth, but I am not making that argument. Now, he speaks about performance as another indicator. Hitherto, we didn't have a policy where government procured past examination questions and examiners' reports free of charge and made them available to the students. Now we have that happening. At least I know that the first and second cohorts of the free senior high school who wrote the Awasi and are currently in tertiary institutions were beneficiaries. And I know that government expended 68.5 million on that. So the argument I'm trying to make is that with this additional intervention that started with the first cohort of the free senior high school beneficiaries preparing for the Awasi, I would have expected even more numbers in terms of achieving grace that their previous colleagues who were not beneficiaries of this particular intervention had achieved. So when you say, for example, that we've done well, we've gotten 411 ones, I would say that I expected us to even get 1,000 ones, because you are giving the students an intervention that was not available to their predecessors. So they should even do better, is the argument that I am trying to make. If we are to use WASI as the standard judgment, because they have had the benefit of free, state-sponsored, provided, past examination questions answered, and examiners' reports. So it is important that we put that in context. Now, the issue of textbooks. If you were to go to the website of the Free Senior High School Secretariat, one of the variables that constitute free is the provision of a core textbook per student for every core subject. On paper, you would assume or think that it is happening. But on the ground, it is not the case. And I have here with me a presentation made by Send Ghana, dated 31st May 2021. And Send Ghana was one of several education sector think tanks that came to speak to us at an event organized by the CDD.
Okay.
And this was held in a hotel around the airport.
No problem.
And the document is titled Post-Election Policy Engagement with Parliamentary Committee on Education. And I take you, okay, they have not numbered their document. But there is a portion that they call areas underperforming.
Oh, okay.
Quality education. And then if you were to look at that, they have textbook pupil ratio far from 1 to 1. At the primary level, they indicated that primary is 1 to 4, and worse in the northern region. Senior high school level, 1 to 3, which would mean that one core textbook is being shared by 3 students for English and maths. And in science, it's one core textbook to 4 students in science. And they go on to say that the situation is worse in Brong Ahafo and the eastern region, where an average of 1 to 6 persists. Now, clearly, this is an issue, and I've raised this issue on many occasions. So there is something that is not right, because on paper, we should not be speaking about these matters. But practically and on the ground, the reality is not reflecting what we are seeing being canvassed or championed by the managers of our education. Now look at the issue of food supply,
yes,
which has become very topical.
That's the big one.
The issue of food supply, I think, can be attributed to two main factors. One is the refusal, and I say refusal, refusal of the Ministry of Finance to disburse resources.
Do they have money?
Well, whether they have money or not, that is not for me to tell. I, as a member of parliament, I know that we debated this budget, and here it is. We debated this budget, we approved it, and Free Senior High School for the year 2022 was allocated 2.3 billion because Free Senior High School is a flagship policy, and it was captured as such. Now, even before the 2022 budget, cumulatively, according to the finance minister, and again, he was responding to a question that I had posed around the expenditure of the Free Senior High School and whether or not, government had contracted a loan to implement. I had made that case because another minister in the finance ministry, Edu Boahin, had granted an interview to Bloomberg.com where he spoke about Ghana going in for a green bond of about $1 billion. He indicated, at least the news item captured him saying that part of that green bond was going to be used to defray loans government had taken to implement its flagship programs, including the Free Senior High School policy. So I posed that question to the minister. The minister denied that, in spite of the fact that this was documented. He said he wasn't aware. It was then that he explained to us that so far, government had expended some 7.62 billion to implement the policy from 2017 to 2021. And in fact, I had issue with that because based on my own analysis and based on the minister's own documents, where in the media review budget for 2020, he had indicated that government had expended some 3.2 billion, which would have been from 2017 to 2020. I thought it was a bit strange that from 3.2 billion in 2021, I asked a question and the expenditure then balloons from 3.2 billion to 7.62 billion. Because I knew that the allocation for the program for 2020 was just about 2 billion, 1.97 billion. And if you were to add 1.97 billion to 3.2 billion, at most, it works out to some 5.2 billion and not 7.62 billion. So I challenged him as to why there was a quantum leap. And he sought to explain that we had incurred a lot of unplanned expenditure in the year 2020 in relation to COVID, and that we had to prepare our schools and make them safe for teaching and learning to resume. But if that was the case, look at the difference between 5.2 billion and 7.62 billion. That is a whole 2.4 billion. And I rejected the claim that a whooping amount of that magnitude could have only been used to prepare second cycle institutions alone against COVID. But that is even another matter. But you see, I am bringing this up because the issue of financing the program and its expenditure in itself is not clear.
How
you
so?
see, well, I've just told you what he told me versus what I know based on his own documents and how the numbers don't add up. Now, remember too that even when he came to Parliament recently to provide, details regarding expenditures to do with COVID, he said that schools, to prepare schools for reopening and to keep our teachers and our wards safe, just about 1.1 billion was used. Now juxtapose that with what the president told us when he came to speak to us on the State of the Nation. He said 1.9. Now, do these figures, even as, unmatching as they are, inclusive of secondary schools or not? And if they were to be inclusive of secondary schools, how then does Ofori-Atta justify the additional 2.4 billion that I say could not have gone to prepare only secondary schools for reopening. So these are some issues that I think we need clarity. And you see, let me even throw in another one. When Alhaji Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia addressed the TESCON conference in Kaswa in April this year, he sought to explain some of the reasons why we are where we are in terms of the faltering economy. He made the case that if you were to combine all of government's flagship programs, the amounts invested clearly cannot be blamed for where we are. And of course, he sought to blame COVID, blame banking sector reform, blame excess capacity, and I can dismiss each of those points with alacrity, but that is not my focus. But what is of interest is that he said that for the flagship policy of Free Senior High School, for 5 years, 2017 to 2021, 5.3 billion have been invested. So the issue of financing and how much has been invested in the program continues to be a matter of concern. Be as it may, let's admit that the program is challenged in the area of financing. Why would we owe buffer stock food suppliers 340 million when the program has been allocated 2.3 billion? I don't understand. So for me, the food crisis, the primary reason, first of all, has to do with, I say, refusal of the Ministry of Finance to disburse resources. And if the resources don't go, and buffer stock food suppliers are not paid, you cannot compel them to supply the food. And that is why, if you were to look at the communication that has come to us from the local chapters of the heads of government assisted secondary schools, they all indicate that buffer stock food suppliers are either not supplying or they have reduced the quantity of supplies that they supply them. And I think this has to do purely with the financial aspects of it. Now, the other issue that I believe perhaps many have not averted their minds to, finally, is that the buffer stock food supply system, I don't think is up to task. You see, let's be honest and be candid. If only politics can be taken out of education generally, and the implementation of the Free Senior High School particularly, I believe many of these issues will not exist. I say so because many of the buffer stock food supply contractors tend to be political appointees, party boys and girls, and apparatchiks. And if you were to look at the PIAC monitoring report of the implementation of the Free Senior High School policy, which is dated December 2019, Free Senior High School Implementation Monitoring Report 2018-2019, they catalog a number of issues just around the food supply chain. They talk about challenges, food supply, non-involvement of schools in the selection of suppliers, corruption risk associated with food supply, and I would highlight that and explain it a bit further, quality, poor quality, and unwholesomeness of supplies, delays and timelines of supplies. Then they go on to talk about under and oversupply of food items and provisions. I am not saying it, but my own assessments, my interactions with headmasters confirm that this is indeed the case. Here's a quick one. Okay. This is the communique issued by the heads of assisted secondary schools, CHAS, at the end of his 59th annual conference held at Bolgatanga from 14th to 21st of December 2021. And they have a long list of issues to do with buffer stock. Here is one. They say, timely, okay, let's leave that and come to buffer stock. They say the challenges associated with the performance of the buffer stock company must be addressed to avoid the poor, unreliable, and erratic supply of foodstuff to schools. Indeed, it must be re-looked at and addressed immediately. Point 5. the Ministry of Education, Ghana Education Service, and relevant allies should immediately review the prices of foodstuff supplied to schools to avoid a situation whereby buffer stock suppliers offload the burden of low buffer stock prices vis-a-vis the prevailing market prices onto the schools by way of underweight of items by suppliers, or, in quotes, negotiated undersupply, unquote, food items. 6. Buffer stock companies should stop the practice of requesting schools to move to regional capitals to cut food items, as this comes at an extra cost on the already financially burdened schools. Okay. Just that portion. So the point I'm trying to make is that it is not just the refusal of the finance ministry to release the money, but even within the system itself, there are challenges. Okay. And I can tell you that as we speak, we know of instances where food supplies allocated, food allocated to schools have not been given in totality. So we hear headmasters complaining of having to sign for 15 bags of rice when they ought to have taken 20 bags or 25 bags, for example. Fact, we hear of supply of expired food items.
I had a report from the Volta region, for instance, where somebody said, a teacher says schools like Spaco, and Dr. Amma, you can note these ones down. Spaco in Denu, Anyako, Some, Senior High School, through to St. Catherine around Dabala, all had to drive to Akachi to pick up sardines. Says the funny thing is that the schools were given half or less of what was on the invoice or voucher. He said for his school, for instance, they were supposed to get 107, they got 75 for the school that he was in.
Very well. So we know these challenges, and we even have instances where the grains are deliberately polluted with impurities to increase the weight. We've seen pictures and videos. Though. By who?
We've heard from the buffer stock, they say that is.
But of course they will deny. What else do you expect them to do? It's just like this.
We should give them such a level of trust.
But we see the pictures. The headmasters talk to us. I can send you videos.
Okay, hold on for me, Dr. Fast. Let me talk to your parents, and then I'll come to Dr. Amma again, go to Kofi Asare, and then we'll wrap this up and then move on to corruption and bad governance.
No, but there's corruption in the buffer stock food chain.
You mentioned it already.
It is there. They are short-changing and cheating, and they ought to be called out. They should be called out.
Mr. Chasoji, Chairman, National Council of PTA, thank you for joining us once again. I'm sure you've heard Dr. Amma, you've heard Dr. Apak, you've heard Kofi Asare. As a parent, we don't hear from you enough on the challenges, I would say problems, on the challenges of education, and particularly the Frida High School policy, bar the recent push because there was no food. What has been your take on the policy so far as a parent? If you can hear me.
Okay, thank you very much. As for the challenges in education, I think, yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Please go ahead. Please go ahead, sir. We seem to have a small problem with Mr. Ajetiso's connection. We'll try and fix that. So let me come to, I want to start the second phase of my conversation with Dr. Amma, then I'll go to Kofi Asare, and then back to, and then Franklin, as usual, on this topic will wrap up, and then I'll begin the corruption conversation with Franklin as well. Dr. Amma, we've heard all these things. Suggestions have been made. In fact, we heard the GS director say something about an interest in a review.
No.
Later, an official, later an official statement from the ministry says there's nothing like that.
He himself has issued a statement.
Okay, good for him. But nothing like that is in play. But should there be a review?
Okay, thank you very much. I would have loved to respond to a couple of issues.
You can, but just make it snappy.
Just a quick one.
You can.
First, Dr. Park mentions that, there's a superstructure when the foundation is very okay. I agree that we need to build up the foundation of education system in terms of primary, JSS and the rest. But we should not also forget that the education system itself started from the superstructure. Universities first, before the secondary and the rest came up. The issue about the NSAT, the National Student Assessment Standards Assessment Test, NSAT, being conducted and result not ready. The NSAT, I was privileged to have developed the operational plan before leaving. The NSAT was a diagnostic tool. When the data is provided, which has already been provided to NACA, the data is supposed to be sent to the school level because the teachers need to be able to identify what specific learning gap the student needs for the teacher to do the remediation that we want.
So it's gone.
So as it is now, the data has been submitted to NACA because WAEC conducted the exams and has submitted the data to NACA. NACA then will have to do the disaggregation because the global information is meaningless to the implementation process. The interest is in diagnosing the learning difficulties of the child to be able to address them, and that happens at the school level. So I'm sure that in due time that data will be made available at the school level. The issues about library and the rest, we have had serious issues about libraries since 1957 up to 2007. The total libraries we had in Ghana was 51. Between 2017 and now, government has added 60 libraries. So we now have about 111 libraries. But 60 libraries in 5 years compared to 51 libraries since independence. So you can see that government is committed in expanding library facilities to our young people.
Schools.
If you talk about the examination, so Dr. Park has alluded to the fact that the program objectives of the free SHS have been achieved. But he feels that more can be done. First, he talks about the access, and he gives the data here, and he talks about the fact that there has been jump from 851,000 to 1.2 million.
He's not impressed.
He thinks that 400,000 more people. And let me tell you this. If you take the data enrollment alone, you must also look at the completion. Completion, the mere fact that somebody has entered secondary school does not mean that the person will complete.
Finish,
Completion rate at secondary school has jumped from 46% to 64%. That's very significant in terms of statistics in that huge jump. If you come to the core textbooks, I know that core textbooks have been provided at the school level. Core textbooks previously were not provided. The students used to buy their books, but these have been provided. It may not be enough, but we need to put in.
Some of the ratios are 1:6.
Yes, additional. But these are
1:6.
Yes, but you have to look at it. Listen, you see, when you pick the data,
what kind of teaching is this?
See, when we pick the data, and you are looking at pupil to teacher ratio, you will see that the global picture shows that the ratio is near parity. But probably there will be, if you disaggregate the data, you are able to identify some areas that they have those high teacher pupil textbook ratio. That may certainly have to be looked at. But you should not paint the picture that the books are not there in the first place. That's my source of concern. He makes reference to the St. Ghana report. I think I was there with him. And the rest. These are a report, a PIEC report. These are reports to help us, improve the system. Okay? The improvement of the system is to ensure that there's efficiency, there's value for money, there's efficiency gains and the rest. I have no problem with that. And I have no problem with the fact that operational reviews are done. And since the implementation of free SHS, operational reviews have been done. And operational reviews refer to the implementation issues like buffer stock issues and the rest. These do not go to the core of the policy imperative of expanded access to secondary education and also improved learning outcome, which have all been achieved.
Yeah. So, but even in the face of the significant financing gap.
Yes.
Even in the face of that?
Yes, even in the face of that, we have achieved the program objective. The free SHS was designed, and that is the point. If you're talking about review, the free SHS was designed to improve access to secondary education and improve learning outcomes. The questions are, have we achieved that improved access?
Yes.
Have we improved the outcomes? Yes. Do we have some internal implementation issues? Yes. and the implementation issues that needs to be addressed, and not the policy of free SHS review. If I were to understand Dr. Park's understanding of the review of free SHS or his party's understanding of free SHS review, that would mean a different thing together, because they don't believe in the way the government is proceeding in terms of everybody having access. They believe in targeted. So in their education strategic plan that was developed, Kofi, as I mentioned, education strategic plan, and that is the foremost policy document that guides education service delivery. The last one that we came to meet, which was the 2020 education 2010 to 2020 education strategic plan. If you look at page 29, and permit me to read page 29, there's something there for you to see. At page 29, the government then says this, and I read. It says this: most of the students attending public senior secondary school actually come from private schools, so they are not poor, and they should not receive boarding subsidies. However, it is important to subsidize needy students, especially those from northern and other hard-to-reach areas. The scope of boarding and hostel provision at SHS will be reviewed in 2010, and it goes on to say that we should do mean testing and the rest. And this is their understanding of the review. It is about cost cutting. I have not seen any center-left party in the world that is in so much obsessed with cost cutting of education, service expenditure on education. We need to understand that education is expenditure. It's not. I find it even difficult to call it expenditure because it's not consumption. Education is an investment. It's an investment, and it's an investment that brings in social capital. It's an investment that produces people to the labor market. It's an investment that has returns, that you have quality teachers, you have medical doctors, you have lawyers. If you look at it from consumption perspective, you look at it from expenditure perspective, you get so worried that why do we have to spend so much money on for example, free SHS? But when you look at the fact that you are training young people who can live a responsible life, who can take part in democratic life, who can assert their civic responsibility. Do you notice that a lot of the violence that occur, many of them are unemployed, young people who are not less educated. Educated people are less predisposed to engaging in violent things. So the mere fact that somebody's education level is moved from primary school to from JHS to secondary school affords the country, opportunity to improve the life chances of the person. Do not forget that there are empirical evidence that clearly suggests that the more the person moves higher in the education has significant impact on our GDP growth. The OECD done a report that shows that if we even allow JSS, everybody who is supposed to be at JSS, if we are able to get those people to even finish JSS, our GDP will increase by over 1,000%. So the issue is that the government understands the importance of secondary education. The president is very much committed. As for the president, as for free SHS, it is a baby that he cherishes so much that there is nothing under the sun that will convince him to change or review in the sense that other people are attempting to suggest. We have to understand that it is expensive to invest in people, but that is human capital, and there's a lot of return on investing in human capital.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Ama. Let me hear from Charles Adjei. I think we have him on the phone now, and then I'll hear from Kofi Asare. Mr. Adjei, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. So, like I was saying, my original question to you was your thoughts on the current problems within the educational sector, particularly with the free senior high school. And you can make comments also about the JHS level as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, key among these challenges that we have at the senior high school level is the issue of which was mentioned by, I think, Dr. Ama, that the core textbooks are provided. However, the elective ones that are supposed to be provided by parents. Well, this information didn't come. So many of the parents from the onset thought that government was going to provide all these, you see, and it took a long time. So, and then also, when it comes to the supply, people will be enrolled into Form 1, admitted into Form 1, the books will not come on time. Before the books come, they might have spent a lot of their learning time not having the books. So we think that is a challenge. So the supplies should be on time. We are also looking at the basic schools. Since the introduction of the new curricula, the teachers as well as the children are struggling to have the requisite, books. We have opportunity to even go to NACA because some of the books have to be approved. And as we speak, just a handful. Teachers will have to go online, to look for the materials to be able to teach. So we are thinking that as parents, government, before the introduction of a new curricula, the requisite books must be in place before the introduction. We don't introduce before the books writers are now put in place to do the writing. So that is also a challenge. If you go to the basic schools, it is a huge, huge challenge. At the basic schools, we have the challenge of this school feeding thing, which the cooks decided not to do because of the low funding to them. Now let's come to the senior high school. The senior high school, when it comes to the seasonal problems that we have regarding food or feeding, we think that the buffer stock, as Dr. Clement Park mentioned, and then I think Dr. Ama also mentioned, I think that it is a timely movement of funds from the Ministry of Finance to the buffer stock that has been the biggest challenge. Besides that one too, we are also thinking of the pricing of the items, where the prevailing market price is way higher than those that are given to the suppliers, for which reason the suppliers are not ready to make them available. And if they want to make them available, then they will reduce the quantity. Reducing the quantity means that the children are going to be underfed. And this is a huge problem that we think the government must be swift on addressing. Now, if you look at these private suppliers, I think that something must be done. If you are going to a private supplier to supply food to these secondary schools, I think it must be well organized. I don't know much about the way it is, but I think that it must be well organized so that the supply of this food, because in recent times, we went to our schools, our people on the ground informed us that sometimes when they said that, because of the challenge of shortage, we have sent this number of this quantity of items to the schools, to the back factor, go for your supplies. They go there and they say, the supplies have not, just reached us. And that is a huge challenge. So we think that we should be very, very, particular about these challenges because it actually borders on how the students will have a stable mind to study in school. Now, one thing that I think I disagree with Dr. Ama, I think he's the one, who mentioned that, the schools under trees can never, and these are the words that he said, can never be eliminated. I beg to differ. If we as a country even decide that within 10 years, we are going to use the 10 years budget for this number of schools that are under trees, we can do it. We can do it. We cannot allow our children to continue studying under trees. So I think that Dr. Ama will have to come back again. And then also he talked about the fact that GS does not set up schools under trees. It is true. But the schools, some of the schools have been set up long ago and did not have a renovation, and they have collapsed. What do you expect the teachers there to do? So they have been conducting classes under trees, and they become schools under trees. So that is how come some of the schools find themselves under trees. So I think as a nation, we should be forthright with the way we treat those at the basic schools who are learning under 3. We need to be forthright with ourselves. So these are but a few. And then one of the challenges, which I think is also a huge challenge, is the infrastructure, lack of infrastructure, in terms of classrooms, in terms of dormitories, when you go to the senior high school in particular. And I think it is for that reason that the 1.5 billion GET fund was secreted for the provision of these. But we think that more has to be done. And so if you ask me, these are some of the challenges, key challenges that we think that if government swiftly address, it will help education so that we can have a better learning outcomes as we are all looking for, and not compromising on the quality.
All right, thank you very much. Charles Adjetey-Sowa is National Council of PTA Chair. And I think on the point that Dr. Prince Armah made on the schools and at least, I think it's a point that can be taken quite well in the sense that communities grow and develop. So in the sense, you will constantly have these coming. But I guess also what Charles Adjetey-Sowa is saying, that if you release money, because there's budget for some of these things, let the money go so that the numbers will come down. Well, sorry, I'll give you 5 minutes. You've heard Dr. Armah's summation of what the issues are and the achievements as he sees them, and the fact that there is perhaps no need for a review in any form as we have the there are operational reviews, but some of the reviews as are being put out there might not be necessary.
All this in 5 minutes.
I might give you leeway. Don't worry. Go on.
I want to do 2 minutes clarification on two issues that Dr. Armah raised. The issue of schools under trees wasn't raised within the context of how they emerged. It was raised within the context of government's plan to eliminate 5,400 of these schools, and government's pledge to raise 3.5 billion Ghana cedis within 5 years to eliminate these schools. That was the context within which I raised the issue. It was an accountability issue, and the point I was making was that government has not demonstrated political will by putting money into that fund, because we are in year 2 and only 14 have been built. The plan was that by year 2 we should have built at least 2,200. So that was the context within which I raised it, and I was to actually extrapolate on the fact that liquidity constraints is affecting mostly infrastructure development at the basic level. Second issue is that infrastructure is very, very important, and we can never wish it away. At the basic level, for instance, the environment teachers teach go to a long way to ensure quality teaching and learning. No matter the quality of curriculum, no matter the fact that the government has been able to increase the percentage of trained teachers from about 75% to close to 95% over a 5-year period, which is remarkable, irrespective. If the environment the teacher is teaching is not conducive to teaching and learning, the perfect curriculum with the trained teacher, no matter how supervised they are, will not create any better learning outcomes. And so it is because we haven't paid attention to infrastructure and the environment within which teaching takes place at a basic level over time that barely 20% of our primary school graduates are able to read a sentence with understanding, according to the World Bank. Second issue is about desks. Between 2017, and I'm doing this because we just finished reviewing the education sector medium-term plan at this level. Between 2017 and now, the percentage of basic school students with desks, without desks, has increased from 30% to 40%. In some districts, like in Kwantanof, in Zabzugu, Tatale, in Zabzugu, in Tatale, Sanguli, you have up to 26% of students sitting on stones. So we have actually added 10 percentage points to the number of basic school students in the public sector who do not have desks. And it is an infrastructural issue. If you do not have desks, you cannot learn. So these are not light issues at all. These are issues that go a long way to determine or explain the reason why only 20% of our students can read a sentence for understanding after completing primary school. So these are very important issues. Now let me come to the issue of the free senior high school review. People are saying that because there's shortage, we are suddenly calling for a review. No. I don't expect any political practitioner to win an argument on free senior school, because free senior school is a political promise. It is not your social intervention policy. It's a political promise. So I don't expect any political practitioner, including myself, to win any discussion on free senior high school. Because political promises are informed first by emotions, and it is normal. So let me say that the calls for the review of the free senior high school did not start because of feeding. I started making the call for the free senior high school policy in 2018, barely a year after the first evaluation study was conducted. I led a team to do that work. And it was mainly because we thought that the policy needed to be targeted, because the funding projections were so huge that government was not going to be able to find the money. After 1 year, that was after 1 year of implementation, that's when we did that particular work. So it's not as though people are suddenly calling for a review of the free senior school today. It is never true, and everybody knows that. The second issue about the call for review and the attempt to trivialize it or make it look knee-jerk or take it out of context is that it is not that people just woke up this morning and they are calling for a review because some schools are hungry, and not the case that in the past some schools had food shortage in 2014 and in 1980. So why are we calling? No, the review is not because of food being short supply. It is never so. His Royal Majesty Otumfuo made a comment that the free senior school policy is putting a strain on the government budget, even though it's a good policy. The Catholic Bishop Council has called for a review. All these calls were done from last 2 years. Catholic Bishop has called for a review. Reverend Pamaboko called for a review. President Moderator, the previous one, current one, called for a review. Methodist, Most Reverend Emmanuel Ayi called for a review. Charles called for a review. Nagrat called for a review. IEA review. National PTA review. CSOs review. Professor Adair review. Adai Mensah review. Our Finance Minister review. Kwame Sefakai review. Professor Aite review. The Director General of the GS has said that DS to prepare to support if government is ready to review. Okay, it's only the Minister of Education who says that it won't be reviewed, and the President who is saying that review means cancellation. So all these calls did not happen last week or last 2 weeks when this massive shortage is happening. So no one should attempt to try and then trivialize the call for review by pretending that it is a knee-jerk response. It's not a knee-jerk. This started 2 years ago, and the people I mentioned are no mean people in our society. So let's look at it from that broad angle. Now, the calls for a review are all saying that the policy must be targeted. Yes, and it is true that for a successful social intervention policy to be sustained, it must be targeted. Now, if you read the free senior school, and I confirm or I support, I validate what Dr. Prince-Ama said. There is a free senior school policy. Just that it's not public. If you read the free senior school policy document, it did not make any analysis, or it did not in the analysis of the risk. Okay, if you read page 39 of the document, in the analysis of the risks, it didn't mention financial funding as one of the risk factors. Perhaps. So it appears that the Ministry of Education or government did not envision that funding was going to be one of the risk factors. It mentioned 4 key risk factors. It didn't include funding. It mentioned risk factors like headmasters charging fees, PTA dues, and people wanting to go and become boarders because of the free feeding, but it didn't mention financing. Okay, but on that same page, it goes ahead and mentions that what are the future issues. And under the future issue section, the B is the point targeting. It means that government envisaged at the planning stage that there will be a time where it will be very important to target the policy. All that we are calling review today, it's all about targeting. It's targeting. That's the only thing all those calling for review are saying, that targets the poor who need a free senior high school. And then let those that have capacity to pay support government. That's the targeting. It's in the policy. But today it's being called review means cancel. So let's be honest to ourselves. Now, Why is the Minister of Education saying that it is not possible to target? He has said it repeatedly. The last time I first made a policy brief on targeting, and he asked, the last time I made a statement that how can you target? It's always about you can't target. But I am saying that you can target. And I believe that it is possible to target. That is why even in the policy document, targeting was seen as one of the futuristic things that must happen to sustain the policy.
Kofi, how do you target?
Yeah, that's the question I'm answering.
Okay.
Ghana government has a Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection. Development partners, World Bank, the UN agencies, USAID, DFID, they've invested millions, if not billions of dollars over the past year, since 2008, to establish what they call the Ghana Household Registry, the Ghana National Household Registry. This National Household Registry is a registry of all the households to determine the poorest of the poor and provide targeted social support to them. Every month, as we speak, 1.5 million Ghanaians receive cash grants between 60 and 120 Ghana cedis from the government under the LEAP program. The LEAP program relies on data from the Ghana National Household Registry, all managed by the same Ministry of Gender. So there are over 344,000 households that have been captured by the Ghana Household Registry as poor households. And 1.5 million people in this household, depending on various indicators, are receiving Momo transfers every 2 months. So it is not true that we don't have data on the poorest of the poor whom we can target free senior school.
Is that nationwide? The numbers you mentioned, nationwide or a region?
From Tumu to Jacob number 3, it's nationwide. Go to the Ministry of Gender. It's a very beautiful intervention that President Kufuor started in 2008, and it has grown to become the biggest social intervention program targeted in Ghana. And other countries are coming to Ghana to come and learn the LEAP approach. In fact, if you go to the Ghana Household Registry's own website, they indicate the benefits of the registry. They say that potential data users of the Ghana Household Registry, they mention social intervention programs of the government of Ghana. They mention LEAP, and of course, LEAP is relying on that. They mention the National Health Insurance Scheme. They mention free school uniforms, free exercise books, etc. They mention Ghana School Feeding Program. These are all government programs that can take advantage of this, as resource. But because of politically expedient reasons, we don't want to utilize the systems that we have built with the public funds to the benefit of the taxpayers' money. That is our problem we are facing. So, targeting, as mentioned in page 39 of the Free Senior School Policy document, was envisaged in 2017. So, when we discuss targeting, whether you call it review or you call it counseling, it is something that was envisaged at a point we will have to target to sustain the policy. Now, what is happening today? I'm ending. What is happening today is that we've gotten to the point where our government financial capacities were stretched. So there are full shortages. PTAs. This week alone, I've engaged 22 PTAs. Last 2 weeks, I had together almost 80 PTAs. We call them PAs now because the chairs are not parts, parent associations. The least amount of money being paid by each of these PA is, I think, 300 Ghana cedis for feeding. Some are paying 500 and more. Wesley Girls, like they are paying 500 and more. Okay, my small boys' school, St. Peter's, we are paying 300 in Kutia. Every parent is paying for the feeding of their children once they can pay. And the food you are finding in the schools today are more or less the money that parents are paying to buy food. Just last 3 days, St. Carmel Girls' School, Akumadan, the PTA contributed. Yes, they used their money to go and buy food, 14,000 Ghana cedis, go and buy food for the school because they were hungry. People were not eating. And then everybody is paying their contribution. The parents are happily paying. It is great, fantastic to see parents exercising the exuberance and the zeal to support government at this critical time. So what we are saying is that now that the parents' money is feeding the children in most of our schools now, and they are not hungry, which is the primary concern of the parents, and for that matter, we are happy. What government should do is that government should develop a framework within which such contributions by parents will be captured and accounted for. Why am I saying so? If in my nephew's school in St. Peter's in Kwetia, the school was supposed to receive 100 bags of rice, but due to financial constraints, government was not able to buy the 100 bags of rice, and parents have provided 80 bags of rice. There must be a system that will tell government, when government is ready with cash, that parents in this school bought 80 bags of rice, and so you only have to give the school 20 bags of rice. Then you are saving the money for the 80 bags of rice for other interventions in the education sector. Because all these parental contributions are made by people who are taxpayers. When you have such a system in place, you will optimize spending, whether it's direct from government or from parents. At the same time, you will build accountable systems so that you don't duplicate, because parents are contributing whether you review the policy or not. And so structure it. This is what I call citizens-led review. Structure it, create a system so that schools can account for whatever they review, so that the headmaster in some school cannot say that we don't have rice, when indeed you have supplied rice. So when such calls come, government will be able to determine that at the time when you receive this amount of food from your PA, as recorded in your data, you actually had this. Government can track. Let's have that system.
Okay.
And then let's embrace it as one of the ways that parents who are capable can support.
All right, thank you.
No one should find secondary education on the basis of their financial incapacity.
All right,
no one is saying that.
Thank you, Kofi. Thank you very much, Kofi Asare, Executive Secretary of the Africa Education Watch. We'll take a quick break. When we return, we'll talk about corruption and bad governance. Afrobarometer has a new survey that says, the government is heading in the wrong direction, a significant percentage. And then a survey by the Ghana Statistical Service has also revealed that an estimated amount of 5 billion Ghana cedis were paid as bribes in the year 2021. We'll try and put all these things together when we return.
You sit there and you waste away in pain. You take beautiful pictures that are thick with ugly secrets. You walk through your corridors of career power with 2 layers of masks on your face. One made of well-done, expensive makeup. The other, what's supposed to be your poker face. She is a professional. Her love for him fluctuates with each bank account deposit. More than enough to pay for the rent, decent meals, and extravagant rides. Your very lonely existence feels cursed with the facade that has become your reality. To you, I say it's okay to hurt. To you, I say that life can exist as you imagined it and as your soul needs it to be. Sex or money, which is the highest currency?
Welcome back to the big issue on the City TV and also on City 97.3 FM. The first part of the show we discussed education. Went a bit longer than I normally would go, but it's an important conversation. Education is what will move the country forward, so it's good that we try and figure that out. And the messages have come through. I'll be discussing corruption in just a second. I'll start with Franklin Kujo on that one. Franklin should forgive me. Diana from Mosu says, good morning, please. Okay. Then I get your message. But I was making a point. Diana's question is on allowing the research findings of Dr. Ama alone to become the basis for significant changes in the educational system. But the context within that was his opinion as based on what he was defending as well. Because you cannot write something and then say something else, you know. So that was the point I was pushing with Dr. Ama, not with regards to the basis for significant changes in the educational system. So I hope that answers your question, Diana. Thank you. Jonas Tinkra from Acropolis says, under the current government, promotion of teachers has been frozen. Upgrading has equally become a thorny issue. We've applied for almost a year now, and nothing has been done. Dr. Park, you can note that down. This one says, Godfrey, as a teacher with 33 years of teaching experience, including 15 years in the GS, it's unfortunate that I really cannot see the sort of education, the sort of foundation we are providing for our educants. This sort of nunuism by the government, pretending that there are no problems when they know there are, is definitely not going to do the nation any good at all. I need to figure out whether this is a proper word. Nunuism. Wow, that's interesting. Okay, let me discuss corruption and other things that have come up this week. So, for instance, we've had the Afrobarometer issue a new survey which indicates that public confidence in the economy has dropped to 2014 levels. Now, according to this, 87% of Ghanaians said the economy was heading in the wrong direction, with 50% saying that the economic conditions in the country were bound to get worse in the next 12 months. Now, this against 25% who are optimistic that economic conditions will be much better in a year's time, and 11% who said the country was heading in the right direction. This is from the round 9 of the Afrobarometer survey. So that you combine that also with a survey by the Ghana Statistical Service that looked at corruption and indicted the Ghana Police Service, Immigration Service, Lands Commission, and others. I will go and talk to Franklin about this. I want to hear from him on the Afrobarometer, first of all, about that number of Ghanaians, and also looked at approval ratings as well of the president. Franklin.
Hi.
Yes, let me bring you in on this one. Afrobarometer, very, 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 very respected survey. When Afrobarometer says things are not going well, you better take it serious. And it looks like citizens are not very happy with the government. 87%, that's a really, really high number.
Oh, not surprising at all. I mean, the Afrobarometer is legendary when it comes to citizens' perceptions about governance and all aspects of governance, really, economic, political, social. So pretty much respected. And I think you can't fault them at all. And it's true. I mean, you just take a cursory listening or look at most of the discussions you had on your own network over the last couple of months, and nothing beats evidence, really. The barometer essentially is a vindication. It's an attestation to the conversations that you've had on your own network, and as well as several media houses have also had. So I'm not entirely surprised at all. Just to add a little point, I recall somewhere in, I think somewhere in June, when we were doing the e-levy survey as well, we put in a question there about how the country, whether the country was headed the right or wrong direction. Just that we obviously did not publish. Otherwise, it would have taken the shine away from the e-levy survey. And indeed, we got 89% at the time, almost saying that the country was headed in the wrong direction. So this is pretty much in keeping with what the Afrobarometer has found. And as I said, this reflects the reality. In fact, the point again to be made is that, I mean, just to buy into your point that things are likely going to be more difficult. In fact, the barometer actually also finds that out, that almost 50% of people are saying that things are going to get worse before they they begin to normalize. If you listen to the Vice President's narrative he gave his own version of why we are where we are today, even though some of us disagreed with his apportioning of blame partly to the previous government. He did say something that was quite true and telling, and that things are going to be much tougher before they begin to normalize. So there again, Afrobarometer has been vindicated, and if the handlers of our economy themselves are looking to the crystal ball and are seeing how things are going to be difficult, so there you have it. The data has met, should I call it, our perceptions, and you cannot quarrel with data and evidence at all.
But if you're a government and you hear that 9 out of 10 of a sample of your citizens think that you are not doing well, that's a significant vote of no confidence in what you're doing, isn't it?
Well, exceedingly, and indeed, in keeping with our own politics here, I have said that this series of these pieces, this type of evidence, and its aftermath. Aftermath, I refer to some of the incidents that occurred in the Ashanti region not a while ago. I think our own majority leader was in the line of fire. Tells you that we need to start reviewing some of the policies that we call promises, right? Some of the things we call developmental, overwhelming vote of confidence in our sloganeering politics. We need to start going to the drawing table and reviewing them. I said that this revelation sounds the deaf, basically signifies that this significantly ends the era of sloganeering in politics, one this, one that, without any real actual impact on people's livelihoods. Of course, we all understand that some of the external shocks have impacted the economy largely, but the Afrobarometer also did say, and I think an allied survey also did confirm, that the reasons why we are here cannot solely be attributed to global phenomena, but that significantly about half of the concerns, also half of the causes of our woes are actually self-induced, self-inflicted, and largely driven by government. And so I think everything is on the board right now. It's pretty much crunch time, even though we know we have a year and a half to go for the next election. Things could change, but I do not see any real value addition from the policies, many of the policies of this government really turning things around. And so I asked myself, what exactly is going to be the campaign message in the next election? Well, like they say, a day in an election, a month in the political life of the people is a lot, and things could change. I just hope that politicians will come to the table this time with realistic promises, and then obviously telling us the truth as to what we can arguably do and what we cannot do. But that is also not to take away from the conversation that this administration has had enormous goodwill in terms of not just political goodwill, but goodwill in terms of resources. The previous administration had investments, and of course, they going to the IMF somehow led to significant growth in 2017 and 2018. And I think the government became too settled and decided to splurge. I cannot begin to recount the number of splurges, but if you superintended a policy like a policy that created the most wasteful ministry in our lifetime, the Ministry of Social Development Initiatives, heralded at the presidency, with zero accountability, there you have it. There you have all these challenges you are facing because you couldn't make significant investment, value investments that would have created the bulwarks against what had come to be called the rainy days of, even if it was externally induced.
And just to ask this on such a turnaround, because the last time, again, we historically saw such numbers against the government was 2014. Doomsaw, and all its attendant issues. We were then getting ready for, I think, another IMF program or so. You've alluded to the government and how they should perhaps consider this going forward. How is there hope for a turnaround when you look at numbers like this?
You know, a lot of commentary has been made concerning the structure of the economy, which is why, even though this government did not necessarily fulfill almost all the 11 structural benchmarks that they submitted to fulfilling under the IMF program before exiting in 2019, it tells you clearly that if you do not have any solid structure, you cannot add anything, or anything you add onto the structure definitely comes crumbling. So to answer the question directly, I think it would be difficult necessarily to turn things around, given the fact that the structural nature of our economy, and as I submit, the various 11 benchmarks that the government has yielded to before exiting the program were largely not fulfilled. What it means is that even if you got lots of money right now, between now and the time an IMF deal is done, and after the IMF deal has been done and the market starts smiling at you, you may end up wasting those investments because the structure to receive these investments, to diffuse their impact and have that significant, make that significant what's called return on whatever investments you're making, is likely going to be not fulfilled because the structures are not there to guide, for instance, value for money considerations in procurement, for instance, right? I mean, if you look at the fact that over the last 5 years, procurement infractions, fiscal irregularities as reported by the Auditor General, has jumped 13 times since the last time Imani did an assessment between 2010 and 2014. It tells you that we are losing the various levers that could rein in, if you like, not just wasteful expenditure, but not thought through policies that are designed as a result of having a lot of money. And so that's why I say that there could be some significant, there may be a turnaround in terms of getting some money as a result of going to the IMF and what have you, but it may only last for a short while because these various structural reforms that are supposed to have been undertaken, unfortunately, have not been done. And so the money will just go into some, for lack of a better word, leaky basket, and then we may not have the impact. Right. Perhaps in the short run, people maybe the government return to the days of giving EVs again as they prepare for the next election. But as I'm saying, that will come back biting us. And whoever takes up the mantle in 2024 would have far more significant barriers to scale than would have experienced after 2015.
All right, thank you, Franklin. Let me talk to Dr. John Osai Kwapong. He's a Democracy and Development Fellow with the CDD, who are, should I say, brothers or sisters or cousins of Afrobarometer. Dr. John Osai Kwapong, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Doc was with us a lot during the COVID periods and has made a return. But Doc, looking at what your sister organization, Afrobarometer, has put out, as somebody who studies democracy and development, what message are the citizens sending out to the government?
I think that one of the clearest message being sent is that there is a lot of dissatisfaction with the way things are going and what citizens are experiencing. If you look at a lot of the conversations in the public spaces, news reports, things like that, Afrobarometer is essentially just capturing people's lived experiences and what they are expressing about those lived experiences. On the question of the direction of the country, for example, if you look at 2017, which is sort of the first year in which this government was in power, The country was split 47-47 in terms of, right direction, wrong direction, right? But at least to have had almost half of the citizens that optimistic about the direction in which the country was going on the back of what the last Afrobarometer in 2014 was showing, right? That you do see that at least there was some sense of optimism there. But then by the time you get to 2019, the wrong direction had increased to 59%. And then, as you mentioned, in 2022, it's increased to 87%. So again, the clearest signal is a sense of dissatisfaction among citizens. And then if you pair that against how they rated government's delivery of key public services, as well as government's economic performance, the sense of optimism with, well, things get better in 12 months, you do see that there is really a clear message to the government that there is a lot of, economic challenges that they are facing, and that people don't necessarily feel that good about the country as of when their opinions and their views were being captured.
Now, with the same question, we also realized during the survey, for instance, that economic management, unemployment, and infrastructure are the three things that matter to a lot of citizens at this particular time and point. And looking at if you draw a line between that and how bad they think the government is performing, and the fact that they're not even optimistic that within the next year things will improve, quite the task for the government then.
Yes, a very huge task, right? Because how do you ensure that you begin to turn citizens around on this question of optimism, right? You have citizens who have indicated that the country is going in the right direction, have indicated that they are not very optimistic over the next year, have also indicated, however, that management of the economy, unemployment, infrastructure are their top three issues. In the same survey, are not rating the management of the economy well, are not rating job creation very well. Then you notice that the government is facing quite a Herculean task to try and turn things around. And then you have all of this also against the backdrop of the announcement of seeking seeking support from the IMF. Time sometimes is a good friend of persons. Sometimes time is not also a very good friend. But what I've been reflecting on then is is 2 years enough time to be able to get all the assistance needed, to be able to churn out the kinds of policies that would help turn things around by 2024. And I think this government is in quite a race against time. It will be very interesting. As you mentioned, I'm a fellow with CDD, so I'll be looking forward to the pre-election polls in 2024, where you'd start getting the election year sentiments of citizens, and you can do some comparisons with Afrobarometer to see the extent to which government has been able to turn or unable to turn public opinion around. But at this stage, the terrain facing the incumbent government is one of extreme difficulty.
And then let me bring you in also on the Ghana Statistical Service survey, what it called the Ghana Integrity of Public Services Survey. I'm sure you've seen the data for that one, where 26% public officials and 9% private sector players engaged in acts of bribery that led to the loss of, basically over 5 billion Ghana cedis being paid in bribes. And I'm sure you're not surprised by some of the institutions that were listed there.
Exactly, right? And again, what this report is showing is it reconfirms and reinforces some of the things that Ghana Integrity Initiative have been able to capture in some of the studies they've done, but also some of the things that Afrobarometer has actually also captured on the question of corruption. The critical piece here is that this actually looks at actual incidences of bribery and, across key institutions. But if you go to Afrobarometer, as I do my work with Afrobarometer, there's a question that lists the number of institutions that says how many of the people in these institutions are involved in corruption. And the response choices are none, some, most of them, all of them. And whenever I look at that, I look at the percentage who answer none of them, because I call that what percent of Ghanaians are willing to give our public institutions a clean bill of health. And if you look at the last couple of rounds of Afrobarometer, the percentage of citizens across a number of key institutions who say none are involved in corruption, it's no more than 6-7%. If you look at police, if you look at courts, if you look at MPs, Office of the Presidency, government officials. So that perception has always been captured very well by Afrobarometer. The good thing that this report does is actually puts another perspective on it, on the actual incidence of bribery and the extent of it, and how it works. But you're starting to see key data points from different institutions and different reports converging on the same point of this challenge of institutional corruption in the public sector. And then particularly if you look at some of the public institutions, it raises quite some number of concerns. The other point, though, that I would want to make is that what I found very curious about the report is I compared the contact rate for the institutions with the bribery rate and the average value of the bribe. And it's quite intriguing that for certain institutions that have low contact rate with the public, that they appeared to have a high rate of bribery. So, for example, the Lands Commission, as shown in the report, has only a 3.4% contact rate, but a 34% bribery rate. Prosecutors, magistrates, judges have only a 1.7 contact rate, but a 22% bribery rate, as captured in the report. So again, you have to start asking yourself that when we start to look at these institutions on an individual basis, you have to ask yourself, what is the cost to the citizen of trying to engage certain public institutions for whatever purposes that they engage in? Because it looks like bribery increases the cost of transacting for some of these key things. And again, so it's quite revealing what it's been able to capture. And I think that what we have to start asking ourselves then is, what are the policy implications and what do we do with information like this?
All right, let me go to Fitzwilliam College and talk to Dr. Justice Tankabe, criminologist. He's a lecturer there as well. Dr. Tankabe, good morning.
Good morning, Godfred.
It's been a while. Hope you're good.
Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you.
All right, so quickly, I want you to focus on the corruption survey for me, because you're a bit of an expert in why people take and pay bribes. And I'm sure you don't have been surprised to see the Ghana Police Service at 1. But just walk me through what your reading is of the top 10 institutions and also of some of the data points which, for instance, highlight the levels of education of the people who are most likely to pay bribes.
Okay, thank you. Just to say that I'm currently with St. Edmund's College rather than Fitzwilliams.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So thank you for having me. I think probably starting from where my colleague John ended. I mean, in a sense, it's not really surprising that you've got the rates that we have for the police. I think we've seen that over the years with various like local surveys, whether they are by researchers or they are Afrobarometer and so forth. But I think the really surprising thing when you look at the contact rates and the prevalence rates is that of the National Intelligence Bureau, right? When you look at it, they have 0.3% contact, which is even high for an agency like that. We are talking about the equivalent of, MI5 or, I mean, if you were to extrapolate from that, for the national population of 31 million, and you're talking about 0.3%, that's quite high levels of contact that people have with an agency like this. But not only that, we have been told that 21% of those who had contact with an agency that is responsible for countering threats to national security, organized crime, drug trafficking, financial crimes, but more importantly, terrorism, which is a major issue in our region, 21% of them paid bribe. That is quite astonishing.
Yeah, it's quite alarming.
It's really alarming to have that. Of course, we have to try and find out what's the nature, who are exactly these individuals, what's the nature of the contact and so forth. But on the face of it, I think that's the most significant thing in the report as I read it. I mean, the issue of education and so forth, I think that's really not surprising because corruption is a crime of elites. It's not a crime of my mom in Gazanti Achumo or the average farmer. Corruption is a crime of the elite, and therefore it shouldn't be a surprise that people with more education are the ones who are paying most of the bribes, or even are the ones who are in positions to be able to elicit these bribes. We are told that 60% or so of the bribes are, if you like, initiated by public officials and so forth. So I think that would be my initial comment. That there isn't. I mean, it's really great to have had such a large survey. I think almost 15,000 people being surveyed to look at these things across different contexts. But I think of course, when we look at the police,
which is what I was coming to. And since you've raised the police, you've done quite a bit of work on the police. You understand them perhaps a bit more. They should not be happy to be perennial leaders on this league table.
No, they shouldn't. But I think it's also the case that even if they were not top of the league, we should still be concerned, because if you look at the police, if you're concerned about the rule of law, you're concerned about human rights, social justice, you're concerned about what role the police can play in the counter-terrorism, counter-corruption strategy, you will be concerned that they themselves are involved in corruption. Indeed, when you look at the report, it tells us that only 3% of those who paid bribes reported. But then when they were asked that would they have, if they had a chance to report, to which agency would they do that? They mentioned the police. The police were the top agency, I think 60% or so, I've forgotten the figure, but if you look at it, the police were the agency that people would have liked to report or said they would report to. But we have a counter corruption strategy or architecture that doesn't really see the police as, if you like, crucial. Okay, they don't play such a crucial role. The police themselves don't collect data on corruption. They don't publish data on corruption. If you look at their crime statistics, they do not include corruption that has been reported to them and so forth. And yet, if you, apart from probably the Ministry of Health, Education, the police are the one agency that is effectively everywhere across the country. And so if they themselves could deal with the issue of corruption, they could play a really critical role in the overall attempt to address the problem in the country.
Just to set something in context for me, as somebody who analyzes data sets, when you read that, and this is for just my viewers and listeners, that based on this, the prevalence of bribery in Ghana is 26.7%, meaning that 1 out of 4 people who had contact with a public official in the 12 months prior to the survey reported having been asked to pay a bribe by a public official or asked to pay one but refused to do so. How bad is that, or what kind of performance would that be in your estimation?
I think it's bad, but again, I think one of the reasons we are concerned about corruption is, the points mentioned earlier, the issue of development, its impact on economic development, what corruption means for organized crime, A couple of years ago, the UNODC produced a report showing strong connections between corruption and organized crime, terrorism, and so forth. So we are concerned about that and so forth. The issue cannot really be a question of prevalence. It has to be, the focus has to be on the seriousness or the volume, the seriousness of the corruption. And that is what we get when we look at the audit service reports, because over there we are looking at high-level corruption or so-called grand corruption. That should be something that is of major concern to us. And there's a sense in which both the petty corruption, because some of these that we are talking about might be just petty corruption rather than, if you like, the more serious cases. Of course, there is a connection between them, but I think we need to, this report just encourages us to probe further, to look at what exactly is the context of these bribes. How much was it? I mean, it provides us some indication of how much people paid. But again, as you can see, I mean, if you were to compare, I think, Ghana with countries within the same, I feel like, band of development, yes, this seems really serious. But my focus would be more on what type of corruption this is, whether this is largely petty corruption. I mean, 5 billion seems like a lot, but I mean, the audit service is telling us last year, I think 17 billion cedis or so was lost. That's something that should really be of concern to us.
And finally, on this, I'm staying with I'm reading, it says there's no difference in the prevalence of bribery in rural and urban areas of Ghana.
Well, I think, I mean, when we talk about how do we tackle corruption, one of the issues that we often, or why it happens, one of the issues we often highlight is just poor supervision. And you can imagine that if you are a public official in the rural areas with power that people don't understand, with very weak supervision, it becomes very easy for you to abuse that authority. So yes, that's a little surprising, but again, if a country is corrupt, there's no reason to believe that some sectors, some geographic areas will be insulated from that corruption. It tells you it's something of a pandemic or epidemic. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Tankaba. We'll take a quick break. When we return, Dr. Clement Apak will have his say and we'll wrap up.
Hi, have you missed any business news this week?
Our appeal to the banks that it is not enough to show fat profits at the end of the year, publish them in the newspapers, and feel good.
Are you looking for a way to consume business news without getting lost in all of the technical language? Well, for our traders down here, all they care about is the fact that this could likely affect the cost of doing business.
We used to pay an average of 3,000 somewhere in November. Now it has shoot as much as $12,000 for a 40-footer container.
Business Weekly brings you all the top business stories of the week in an exciting manner.
Business Weekly, Sundays at 3 p.m. only on City TV.
Well, so, are you ready? Let's go.
Welcome back to The Big Issue. We enter the final lesson. Dr. Apak would have his say on the Afrobarometer survey. The last time we saw numbers this bad, your party was in power. You were kicked out soon enough. Should then people be worried?
Well, if you want my honest opinion, the last time you saw numbers this bad and we were in power, the situation was not as dire. and reckon that we had not made the kinds of promises that the current regime made. And I want to take it from the perspective of the fight against corruption, because it feeds into what we are seeing.
Yes.
If you remember, in the run-up to the 2016 election, at one of the presidential debates, the current president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, made corruption, by and large, his central plank in his campaign. And he spoke about the adoption of the Anas principle,
yes,
as part of the new ways that he thought he could address the canker of corruption. And on many occasions, he was very bold in stating how he was going to protect the public purse vis-a-vis his predecessor. Well, as we speak, not only has he failed to apply the Anas principle, and under his watch, high-ranking members of his political party have led the crusade against Anas and the Anas principle. Now, one other area that he sort of championed as part of canvassing for power was the establishment of the Office of the Special Prosecutor. I mean, if you've seen that document, as we passed in Parliament, and this content, and what it sought to do, vis-a-vis what we know now, clearly, he deviated. When he appointed the former
Martin Amidu,
Special Prosecutor Martin Amidu, who happens to be my uncle, he's a Busa by ethnicity, there was a lot of excitement across board. But look at the series of epistles that Martin Amidu issued, essentially indicating that he had been given that appointment, but one, the tools and even information that he desired to be able to fulfill his mandate were not available. And that was why he eventually, out of frustration, resigned. And you remember in one of his epistles, he actually christened the current president the mother serpent of corruption. So when you have this context where the man who is leading the nation himself has been questioned in terms of his willingness and his preparedness to do what he had promised to do, you can then not be surprised if we are seeing these reports suggesting corruption in the judiciary, security agencies, NIB, national security, because essentially the head of the fish is rotten. So every other state institution that reports to that head of the institution, as you can see from the survey, has been indicted. You know, before we left government, one of the things that President Mahama was doing, besides, in fact, even granting permission and authorizing some of his own appointees to be held accountable for alleged acts of corruption, was the initiation of the Citizens Complaints Unit. Interestingly, I was the one that the president assigned as one of his staffers to set up the Citizens Complaints Unit.
Did it work?
And the motive, yes, it was working. The motive was to allow citizens to come there and file complaints about the ills going on in public service delivery. Why do you have to go and pay a bribe to a customs officer to clear your goods? Why do you have to go to pay a bribe to somebody at ECG to get a meter? We're dealing with all of these things, and I can show you reports. But soon after we left office and they took over, the Citizens Complaints Unit was closed. So the point I'm trying to make is that nobody should be surprised. But the worry is the kinds of institutions that hitherto, perhaps we didn't even have the knowledge or information that they were also in the business of taking bribe.
Which ones?
I speak about the NIB. I mean, if the National Bureau of Investigation, formerly BNI, is cited, national security is cited, then as a colleague said earlier, we are in trouble because we know the implications of how crooks, criminals, drug barons, traffickers can use these dirty resources as a basis to corrupt public officials who would then look the other way for them to engage in all kinds of nefarious activities, including the prospect of terrorists bribing their way through. And so it is a matter that is very worrying. But ultimately, we must blame the president for failing to deliver on the promises that he has made. Look, I sit on the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament. For the year ended 31st December 2020, the boards, corporations, and other statutory institutions report, which was laid and has been, given to us to look on. We could not account. The auditors did not find evidence to support an expenditure in excess of 12 billion. From procurement breaches to misapplication to plain old embezzlement, you name it. 12.4 billion. You would have thought that there would have been an improvement. The 2021 report of same has been laid, and as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, I have my copy. It has increased from the slightly above 12 billion to over 17 billion in just 1 year. So clearly, some of us are now of the opinion that under Akufo-Addo Bawumia NPP government, corruption has actually won the fight against Ghana. Because it is so prevalent. I'm not saying it. And what we have been saying has been confirmed. It is literally everywhere. And it doesn't seem to be abating. So, if Ghanaians are saying that the country is headed in the wrong direction, these are some of the reasons. And so government then tries to justify why we are where we are by looking at other factors. But in my own analysis, when you have a government that has benefited from the most revenue in the history of this republic, over 500 billion, which has borrowed more than any other government since independence till date, taking our national debt stock from 120 billion to 400 billion, which would mean a whole 280 billion. And as a result of clear mismanagement, blatant corruption, as we have seen in the case of the PPA and his boss, who is currently in court, as I've narrated within the context of the Auditor General's report, where we have an Auditor General who is refusing to exercise his powers to disallow and surcharge, then it looks as if there is an official scheme in place that is allowing this to go on without anyone who has the capacity to put the brakes on, putting the brakes on. And you see, when you do all of this, and then you then blame Russia-Ukraine war, COVID-19, excess capacity, banking sector reform for economic woes. The people are not stupid. They know that the president has been traveling using luxury jets, paying in excess of $17,000 an hour. They know that the banking sector reform could have been resolved with about 11 billion, and yet government made a conscious decision to expend 24 billion to solve an 11 billion problem. They know that the excess capacity claim cannot be justified because in 5 years, according to the finance minister, responding to a question in parliament, we had expended just about $900 million and not the 17 billion that Dr. Bawumia claims. They know that COVID actually profited this government because you got 25 billion that hitherto you wouldn't have received.
So people know better, you're saying.
You had extra to support a budget. You had extra to serve as seed money to open a bank. You are even leaving the citizenry to pay for free water and free electricity that you claim you had given to them during COVID. And then they wake up one morning and hear a tape circulating attributed to one Madam Felicia, who was the candidate of the ruling party in Sagnarigu, indicating how monies were given to her and others to campaign. So we have said that if you look at our economic woes, it is largely because Government expended our resources to secure a mandate that it even struggled to achieve. And this is why we are where we are. Not all these tangential issues. And then when you add that to the blatant corruption that we are talking about, clearly you cannot expect Ghanaians to give the president and his government the lowest marks. And I can tell you, if we were not practicing this hybrid of the Westminster and American system, and we're practicing the Westminster system, this government has essentially collapsed. Because the people have lost faith.
A recall.
And it is obvious that they are going to lose the 2024 election.
We haven't reached there.
No, I can tell you.
Okay.
They are going to find it very difficult to change this trend. That is a fact.
Let me read messages. Let me see. Good morning to all. This one says, please, I want... Okay, AU Farouk Tamale says, good morning. Seriously, the government has destroyed education in this country. No one even knows how the system runs anymore. The free SHS is collapsing. And if Ghana was some other country, leaders would have resigned honorably for the sake of integrity. This is coming from Xylix Dwayne. A few more that has been said to me by the listeners. Well, I think I've read this batch already. So, yeah. It's been a great discussion on the big issue this morning. Thank you very much, Dr. Clementa Park. I'm a panel for Busa South.
I didn't get to finish my bite on education.
You will not,
because Ama is not being fair. I have statistics here that shows that completion rates are not what he claims.
Gave you time.
He claims
Dr. Prince Amin Ama, member of parliament for PC team, Dr. Assistant Kabe.
Textbooks, no elective textbooks, they should supply them.
The St. Edmund's College, Franklin Kujo, President of Imani Africa, Dr. Jonose Kwapong as well. Also joined us on the program. My name is Godfrey Akoto-Boafo. I hope you had a great show, and I wish you a good weekend. See you next time.